But this time last year, as a freshman at Syracuse, I was lucky enough to get an invitation to the dance. And we walked all the way to the national championship.
Syracuse refuses to lose, and they are the national champions of college basketball.
65 teams will compete, but only one team's dream will become a reality. And trust me, there's nothing better than being the last one dancing. I hope you dance.
Eastern Washington goes to the dance for the first time in school history.
They got their dancing shoes and their Cinderella slippers ready. Shine the shoes, the Golden Knights are going dancing.
I hope you never lose your sense of wonder. You get your fill to eat, but always keep that hunger. May you never take one single breath for granted. God forbid love ever leave you empty-handed. Promise me that you'll give faith a fighting chance. And when you get the choice to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance. I hope you dance. Give the heavens above more than just a passing glance. And when you get the choice to sit it out or dance.
2 seconds, Robinson at the buzzer! Yes! Yes! Yes!
Dance. I hope you dance.
And here's to this year's 65.
Bracketology, the NCAA Men's Selection Special, is presented by Staples.
You just heard from the hero of last year's NCAA tournament. Who will it be this year? This 3-week basketball feast is about to start in 48 hours. In the meantime, welcome to Bracketology 101, 201, and 301. It's a 3-hour show. You're going to have your feast of bracket talk. Chris Fowler, Digger Phelps, Dick Vitale, Jay Billis, and Steve Lavin will join Reese Davis. Andy Katz is here, and here's what we got for you. You're going to have plenty of opinions and predictions right down to the national champion coming up in the next few hours. Martelli, Montgomery, Jamie Dixon of Pittsburgh, and Mike Bray of Notre Dame will join us live. Of course, we'll get to talk to Bob Bowlesby, the NCAA committee chairman, to discuss the field and the seedings. Always issues to talk about. And throughout the program, the top 10 ESPN basketball modems as voted on by you, the fans. And this is an interactive show. I want you to participate. Log on to ESPN.com, search bracket, answer the poll questions, enter the tournament challenge. We want you to give us your opinions, and throughout the show, we'll have the results. Time now to talk about one of the games that shaped this field of 65. It was the classic ACC tournament game. Dick, you're fresh off the plane. Your thoughts on that game and this field?
Well, you know, it's an incredible performance by John Kilgariss. You know, just looking at this unbelievable field here in about 2 minutes, I think the committee had a very, very difficult time this year, and I really believe they did a phenomenal job. Just, again, glancing at that, I think the bottom line was out there to rewarded some of the mid-majors for having great years like Air Force, and the bottom line is also in the seeding process, I think I have no problem with St. Joe's. Some people may have a problem. They had one slip, basically, and I really think they rewarded them for an entire year. I say I give the committee, based on what I've seen right now, Bob Bowlesby and company an A.
Well, I look at the whole field, and when you look at the #1 seeds and when they all come out, I really don't think it's going to be so important who's the ones, because the 2s are that good also. But watch out. The 3, 4, and 5s, there's so many balanced teams. Take Maryland as an example. A couple of weeks ago, they're fighting to get in. They got to make that last win against Virginia at home to end up that season to go 7-9. But then they have to beat, as they go through that tournament, and get it done, Wake Forest, North Carolina State, and then Duke. They're on a roll. But the question is now, are they burned out, tired out? But that's how this NCAA field's going to be.
Well, you say the committee gets an A. I don't think they're thinking about that in Logan, Utah, home of Utah State, or Boulder, Colorado. The Buffaloes, certainly disappointment in Tallahassee and South Bend. We'll visit the the disappointments and the teams that slipped in. But I'm just
there'll
saying,
always be a disappointment every year. They can't put everybody in the poll. Bottom line is there's going to always be that team that's left out. I think what they did here, they rewarded teams that had great years other than Utah State. That's the only gripe I would have looking at it. I say, though, the toughest region, just looking at that one, I'm seeing a number 6 seed like North Carolina. I think that Atlanta region is unbelievably tough.
We're going to show you the Atlanta region very soon, but first let's talk about the ACC championship game. Maryland trailed Duke by a dozen in the final 3.5. Then Mike Jones knocks on the triple, gets him within 1 there. John Gilchrist, play of the game. Sheldon Williams called for the foul, fouls him out. Lavin says terrible call. He hits the free throw and ties the game at 77 for Gary Williams. 5 seconds to go. J.J. Reddick, who was 1 of 8 behind the line, fails to hit the game-winning shot. We go to overtime. In OT, Gilchrist just took over, Dick.
I'll tell you, Gilchrist was absolutely sensational. He put an unbelievable show on. Great winner's mentality. Gary's kids never quit.
Watch this, though. Chris Duhon, bruised ribs. He hit a camera early in the game, comes back to knock down the game-tying 3. Now, final minute of overtime. Mike Brennan, little-used veteran player. He was part of the championship team a couple of years ago. Maryland, not a great free-throw shooting team. They were 14 of 18 in overtime. Got it done at the line. Daniel Ewing's shot doesn't go. Maryland, first ACC championship since '84, and they snap Duke's streak at 5. But Duke gets the #1 overall seed, and we'll talk about that. They'll take on Alabama State, a team that's 16 and 14, champions of the SWAC, and certainly they were a candidate for that play-in game. Seton Hall is safely in at number 8. They'll take on Arizona. Wildcat fans may grumble about that low seeding and a potential second-round matchup with Duke. They shouldn't. They should be glad for it. Illinois, seeded number 5, they take on the Racers of Murray State. 28-5. Cincinnati will take on East Tennessee State in the 4-13 game. That's the team that scared Arizona a year ago. North Carolina, Dick, you talked about that. They are in, and so is Air Force. Is it sentimentality? Are they rewarding a regular season? We'll get to that issue. Trust me. Texas and Princeton, the 3-14 game. Xavier, the team that won 4 games in 4 days. They thankfully get a Friday start against the 10 seed. Louisville, Mississippi State holds on to that number 2 seed despite losing in the quarters of the SEC. They'll take on the team from Bruce Springsteen's backyard, Monmouth. All right, let's talk about Florida and Kentucky now. This is the SEC championship game. The Wildcats just grinding down the Gators here. This is a very familiar situation in the SEC championship game. Chuck Hayes to Azubuike, then Hayes to Gerald Fitch for the lay-in there. Look at the feeds by Kentucky. Almost all of their baskets in the first half had assists. They led it by a dozen, really would never let Florida get close. Eric Daniels, Hayes the jump hook in the lane. Kentucky by 15, and Florida's offense just could not get untracked against that Wildcat defense. Here's Hayes for Daniels, and Kentucky certainly looks tough. The committee rewarding them with the #1 overall seed in this bracket. They are headed, they hope, to St. Louis, but they'll play in Columbus in the first round against the winner of that opening round playoff game between Lehigh and Florida A&M Tuesday night in Dayton. Washington in and safely as an 8 seed. We'll talk about their 8-9 matchup against UAB. It's Providence against Pacific in the 5-12 game. Kansas gets a 4 seed against the Flames of Illinois. Chicago, bottom half of this St. Louis/Midwest bracket. It's Boston College against Utah. There'll be 3 teams from the Mountain West in there. Utah got the automatic bid. Georgia Tech against Northern Iowa. Michigan State, a 7 seed, as they were last year when they made a push to the Elite 8, taking on the Wolfpack of Nevada, conference champions. And Gonzaga does get that 2 seed that they coveted. They will play in Seattle, which is very important for them on Thursday, against Valparaiso, which is not the Valparaiso team you might expect. They were 18 and 12 this year. Illinois and Wisconsin for the Big Ten championship game. Illinois riding that 12-game winning streak. They hadn't lost since they got blasted by Wisconsin in Madison. Devin Harris, who chewed up the Illini in that earlier game, once again had a big game. Big Ten Player of the Year was brilliant.
Oh, he's absolutely sensational. He's been great all year for Bo Ryan.
You see the shot just before the shot clocked the off-balance runner. He couldn't miss. 10 of 16 from the floor.
They're one of my sleeper teams, Chris.
Alley-oop slam, Wisconsin's first Big Ten tournament title. 70-53. Harris, of course, is the outstanding player. In the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma State, each going for their first ever Big 12 title. And that's Tony Allen, who just had a brilliant tournament for the Cowboys. Bobbitt, the alley-oop, and the athletic guard slams it down. They would begin to pull away. One point led Texas on the 21-4 run in the first half. Allen knocking down the triple. And then Allen driving, spinning, gets it to go. Game high 21 points. Cowboys do win it 65-49.
Kind of surprised that they weren't a #1 seed.
Well, St. Joe's is the #1 seed, as you alluded to, in that East Rutherford/East region. We'll devour that topic. They'll take on the Flames of Liberty. Texas Tech against UNC Charlotte, a very competitive 8-9 game. Florida, 5 seed against the Jaspers of Manhattan, team that lost at Syracuse by 6 and beat Richmond. Team to watch out for, frankly. Wake Forest, one of many contenders for the Final Four out of the ACC, will take on Virginia Commonwealth and Coach Capel, the youngest in Division I. There is Wisconsin, a 6 seed. So many feel that's not
yeah, the Big
good enough seed.
Well,
Big Ten.
That's just a slap at the Big Ten because of the year they had, and they win their conference tournament, and they don't get a higher seed. I thought maybe they'd get a 4 or 5.
They're one of my sleeper teams, Digger, along with North Carolina. Very dangerous teams at the #6 seed.
Well, how do you feel about Pittsburgh? And we'll get into this more, but Pittsburgh slides to a #3 seed, losing a heartbreaker for the Big East title. They would have to play in Milwaukee, potentially against Wisconsin in the second round.
That is really a tough break. They got a raw deal right there. But there were 9 teams the committee was looking at for those top 8 slots to be seeded.
Memphis, South Carolina, Oklahoma State, Eastern Michigan. Again, this is just the first of many looks at these brackets. As we go to the Phoenix region, we'll just call this the West. And Stanford, the 1 seed against UT San Antonio, the Roadrunners out of the Southland Conference. Alabama, potentially a very tough team to play with anybody in the country against Southern Illinois, which gets the at-large bid after dominating the Missouri Valley. Syracuse, defending national champions, are seeded 5, and there's BYU getting one of those Mountain West at-large bids as a 12 seed, one of the last teams in. And Maryland, talked about a Digger making the big move to 4. They'll take on UTEP, which is the lowest seeded at-large team, and slipped in.
Yeah, when you look at Jamar Smith and Travis Garrison, they were the unsung heralds today. We talked so much about Gilchrist, but this team being a 4 seed, they earned it, and winning those 3 games they did is the reason why they are now a 4 seed, and they're going to be tough to beat out there.
They happen to be in a good region, too, because that region from top to bottom, Digger, I don't think is super like the Atlanta one.
Well, here is the bottom of that Phoenix region. It is Vanderbilt against Western Michigan. NC State, the 3 seed, against Lafayette. DePaul against Dayton. There's a very interesting 7-10 game in Buffalo on Thursday. And Connecticut, obviously, playing where they want to play in Buffalo.
The Huskies are ready. They earned it in New York, and look out. They're happy to be out in Phoenix because I look to them to make right through and get to that Final Four.
Yeah, that's my pick as well. But you and I thinking alike already. I got the Huskies going to San Antonio.
They got to win a couple of games to get to Phoenix as well. How about Taylor Coppenrath against Emeka Okafor? Matchup in the post in that first-round game.
I'll tell you, Taylor can light it up at 43. Certainly excited. My partner, Mike Patrick, would love them.
Well, speaking of Connecticut, we're about to bring you the first of 10 great moments during ESPN's silver anniversary of bringing you college basketball. These were as voted on by you, the fans, on ESPN.com. Go back to the 1996 Big East Championship game, Connecticut against Georgetown. Here's number 10.
There's electricity in the house. We got the best little guy in all of basketball, Allen Iverson. We got the best swing man in college basketball, Ray Allen. Really getting to a danger time right now for Connecticut. Georgetown really operating well.
0 for his last 13 from the floor for Ray Allen. Georgetown leads by 1, but UConn has the basketball.
Gonna try to kick it out, a little handoff.
Allen with Iverson on and throws one up. Georgetown can win if they score. Iverson with 7, with 6, Spades. Missed it. Williams, rebound. He missed it as well. UConn survives.
Connecticut wins their first Big East championship, this group of people.
Ebsen.
Everybody loves basketball is going to watch it, and I know in spring training it's a focal point. Players, they love to have their little pulls and stuff, and it just creates a lot of excitement.
You can go home at 11 o'clock in the morning and have a basketball game on until like 10 o'clock at night.
The competition, just the excitement and you know, filling out bracket sheets and, you know, just playing for fun and having pride on the line.
I promise you there's more than fun and pride on the line of those Major League clubhouses when they fill out those brackets. There's a lot of that on the line with those
there
guys.
There really is? They don't have no cash, Chris. Come on now. They're not in your league.
Well, for the folks who are filling out the bracket at home, we begin by breaking it down piece by piece. We're going to start in the Atlanta, which you can call South if you want to be old-fashioned here. I don't think anybody believes that Alabama State's going to give Duke that much trouble. Even if you flunked Jim Herrick Jr.'s hoops class, you know no 16 has ever beaten a 1. But let's break down the 8-9 game. Seton Hall against Arizona. Now, Arizona is a team that doesn't have a win over anybody in this field since December. They did beat Louisiana Lafayette and they beat Liberty. They have that one big win against Texas. You'd have some question that even the 9 seed, although their fans will have a problem with that, probably.
If they ever decide to play, this Arizona team is really, really quick. They got great guards, and they've got everything else going their way, Dick.
Well, you know, they got a good starting 5 and transition. They're outstanding. The bottom line is they've been hurt big time with depth. I see this matchup with Seton Hall. That's my alma mater. Andre Barrett could be the key in this, a veteran player going against the diaper dandy Shakur. I don't know. This is a tough one to call. I give slightest of edge. Slightest. I can't go against my alma mater, man, Seton Hall. But Arizona, extremely dangerous. I disagree with you, Chris. They're better than what you believe.
Oh, no.
They are better.
On the paper, yes, Dick, but when it's hard to argue. If you took their resume, put a different name at the top of Arizona's resume.
They lost a lot of tough games, and they played really early in the season a tough schedule.
When they play, they're as good as any team in the country.
Yeah, they blew Texas out.
When you look at their team and their personnel and how they go, I just feel Channing Frye in the paint. He can dominate. He can block shots. He can make things happen. Their guards are that quick. And when they decide to play with the guards, it takes the pressure off with Frye. But you've got to start with Channing Frye in the middle. You got to get him open. He can flat out score. He's a double-double player. He can block shots, and you can lead your defense to him. That takes the pressure off of Stoudemire, Adams, and Shakur. And I think Lute Olson can flat out coach. He's been there. And I just feel that this team, with their defense, and don't be surprised if they start playing that matchup zone, which Arizona can play, this team could be a surprise because they know they've had a lousy year. This is their chance to regroup, and with Channing Frye and their team, they can get this thing going. I really believe that.
I think this shows you how tough it was for the committee and a parity that exists, that they're a number 9 seed. You know, the one thing that glares at me, I thought the Big Ten, the 3 upper teams in the Big Ten, should have been a little higher seeds than what they are.
Well, let's talk about one of the teams in the Big Ten, Illinois, that made it to the championship game. They end up with a 5 seed, and they will take on Murray State. Illinois, a team that really had it rolling, although it's tough to judge what they did. If the Big Ten is really as down as people say, that winning streak was compiled against subpar Big Ten teams, and they take on Murray State. That's a tricky matchup for a young team.
Well, you know, Mick Cronin, the former assistant coach, he was a second lieutenant to Rick Pitino and is a rising star. And he's got some really good, talented players. However, Illinois' backcourt, Williams and Brown, you know, they hadn't lost the game until today, since January 24th. And the Big Ten was not vintage. They'll be back again, the Big Ten. But the bottom line is the 3 upper echelon clubs, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Michigan State, they can play with people. There's no doubt about it. Michigan State lost early, but improved as the season progressed.
But let's talk about Illinois. I think when Bruce Weber came in and played replacing Bill Self, they had to go through that transition period the same way Kansas went through their transition period. But I think when you look at this Illinois team, their guards are that solid. When you look at D. Brown and how he's hot, when he's hot, they're hot. And when he's not, you can get it to anybody else that goes out on that team. I love Luther Head. I love Darren Williams. And Augustine can really get on the boards. They've got guys that can play this game. They know they got beat today by Wisconsin, but the thing is now they just have to regroup, understand what they can do, get it done, but play the defense, which has been a weakness for them. And yes, that 11-game winning streak has not gone away. Yeah, they got blown out today by Wisconsin, but the fact is I love Illinois to be a team that can get hot now.
The only thing I would say about the Big Ten again is Wisconsin, I thought, should have been a little higher seed than number 6. Yeah. Maybe a number 3 or number 4. And the bottom line is also Illinois maybe a 4. But, you know, these clubs are so close. And as you've said, Digger, and I agree, and we've been saying, we make such a big thing out of the seeds. You got to go play, man. You got to win 6 games. You got to survive and advance. Bottom line is you got to win. Can't cry about it, can't whine about it.
Right. Seeds may be overrated, but who you've got in your bracket, matchups and styles, that's very important.
That's the key now is the matchups.
Thanks a lot, Coach Fowler.
It's just one man's opinion. We got a lot more opinions across the studio. Very close by, Reese Davis, Jay Billis, and Steve Lavin, guys.
Hey, they're pretty good looking, those guys.
How about this? Is this a good looking set, Dick? Is that what we're saying? I'm telling. Hey, you know, Jay, you've been saying that for the last couple of weeks.
Talk about a 16-1.
16's never beaten a 1 either. Jay's been saying for the last couple of weeks that it's not so much about the seeding. It's about the matchups you get. And as we try to take you through the bracket and tell you at least who we think is going to move on, for our purposes, top 4 seeds, we're going to say they're going to go ahead and move on unless these guys feel strongly about it. So let's start with the matchup. 6 versus 11 in Atlanta, North Carolina and Air Force. An Air Force team I know they dominated the Mountain West. Some question whether they should have even been here.
I didn't think Air Force should have been in. I applaud the season they had. They were 9-6 on the road, but they didn't win any games against the top 25. They only won against Utah and BYU. Those are solid wins, but nothing spectacular. The problem I have with Air Force is even though they won the Mountain West Conference, they played and won 6 games against the bottom 25 teams in Division I, teams ranked 300 or lower. I thought Notre Dame should have been in before Air Force, but it doesn't mean Air Force can't play. They can, but I think they're matched up against the most dangerous team seated at number 6, and that's North Carolina, because North Carolina can score, and they can stop the Princeton offense. Right. They can score.
Yeah, I really like North Carolina in this game, but Joe Scott and Air Force deserve some credit for a tremendous season, and it is difficult to prepare to play that Princeton-style offense with only a week in preparation. When you look at North Carolina, though, they're so deep, not deep, they have the most talented starting 5 in the country. The one thing they do lack is overall depth. I think in the NCAA tournament, with the long TV timeouts, 2.5 minutes, that helped to neutralize or offset Carolina's one Achilles heel, which is their lack of depth. But let's face it, in terms of coaching at this stage of the season, Roy Williams, one of the best, 2 consecutive Final Fours, and they are so quick, so athletic. This North Carolina team has a chance to run the table to go to San Antonio.
Well, I know everybody runs their offense a little differently, but Carolina has seen NC State, at least, run sort of a version of this offense. It might help in preparation a little bit.
There's no question. They have to rebound against it, and they can certainly do that with Sean May, who grabbed 21 rebounds against Duke and 15 rebounds in the rematch at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I hate to go back to Air Force and keep harping on this thing, but if the criteria is the 34 best at-large teams in the country, you can't tell me that Air Force is one of the 34 best teams, and you certainly can't put that in before you put in a team like Notre Dame or even a team like Virginia that won 3 games against the top 25.
Okay, and as you look at the other part, the close matchup in this Atlanta bracket, oh, by the way, nobody should run the Princeton offense better than Princeton since they're in there. 3 versus 14 Texas, but we're going to look at this Xavier-Louisville game. Musketeers not only got hot in the A-10 tournament, this is a team, Jay, they've got senior leadership with Chalmers and Sato and Fenn and Miles. Dangerous team for a Louisville team that's been struggling.
There's no question about it. I think Lionel Chalmers is one of the best guards in the country that nobody really talks about. And Romain Sato, he can rebound, he can defend, he is very athletic and very long-armed. This Xavier team does know how to rebound, and that will be a problem for their opponent in this thing. I think that Louisville is so banged up, and Taekwon Dean has not been the same player since he got hurt right before the Tennessee game. And he's not able to get out and guard. He cannot get any lift out of his jump shot, and Louisville does not rebound. That's where Xavier is going to have an advantage.
Yeah, these teams are going in different direction. You've got a hot Xavier team in the postseason. That's one thing about the conference tournament. It's a fresh slate, clean slate, fresh start, and Xavier is taking full advantage of it, playing with great confidence right now. A very aggressive, tenacious defensive team. And Louisville, on the flip side, they are really struggling, staggering, stumbling into the finish line. I think a combination of both Rick Pitino in the mid-season when he went out, and then also Francisco Garcia and Taekwon Dean. They never regained their stride after that mid-season slump. They got off to a great start.
Louisville is going to have to press, and watch out for Anthony Miles and Justin Dolman. Dolman's just a freshman, but he's a really solid player.
So we've got the 6th seed North Carolina moving on, the 7th seed Xavier moving on. No big-time upsets just yet, Chris.
Now, Reese, but interesting to watch America weigh in that Xavier-Louisville game. 50-50 on ESPN.com. Exactly half of you think Xavier won, the other half think Louisville win. That's something we'll track throughout the show. In the meantime, we continue our countdown of the 10 greatest moments as voted on by you during ESPN's 25 seasons of college basketball. How about this? Does this sound familiar? A comeback in the ACC in the final minutes, and it came down to a buzzer shot. And in this game, Carolina-Virginia in '83, a guy by the name of Michael Jordan, his legend, was born.
This game is certain to be #1 in the national polls. Rebound by Michael Jordan, blocked by Sampson.
Sampson said, "Get it out of here, Jordan. I'm #1 in America."
North Carolina only 3 points behind now with the ball and 1 minute and 15 seconds to go. That'll tie it if it hits. Tipped in onside by Jordan.
He's a winner.
A 2-point lead.
He's a winner
by Jordan.
Here we go.
Michael Jordan led an unbelievable comeback here and hands Virginia a heartbreaking defeat.
Last week on Dream Job.
No good, it's tipped up, grabbed by Hamilton. No good, it's tipped up, Hamilton puts the fadeaway up and in at the buzzer.
There's a lot of things that compare with March Madness. One on the top of the list is NFL playoffs.
Snap, ball down, kick up. Kick is on the way, and it is good! It's good! It's good! And the the Patriots are Super Bowl champions.
With the tournament, once you get some underdog teams that come in and always seem to knock off the big guys. So at that point, it's pretty fun to watch.
Bardo gets it in. Norman at the buzzer. No good. Austin Peay has upset Illinois.
Welcome back. Now let's shift over to the East Rutherford/East region. These are teams hoping to get there. That'll start out in Buffalo. And we talked about St. Joe's getting the 1 seed. These are different philosophies about this. You agree with that? Many people do not. I hope we get a chance to talk about that later on. But the focus is now on the 8-9 game, what will be the second round opponent for the Hawks. Bob Knight and Texas Tech against UNC Charlotte.
Yeah.
I give a little edge right here to Texas Tech. I really like Andre Emmett. I think Bobby Knight in tournament time can be very tough. I think he understands what the tournament's about. Certainly Bobby Lutz's club is a dangerous club when you look at Charlotte. Obviously with Withers is outstanding, Brown on a perimeter. I think they'll be a formidable foe. But somehow, some way, I think that Bobby Knight and Emmett and his club are going to move on.
I look at Texas Tech and the experiences there. When you look at Andre Emmett, probably the best scoring player in the country when it comes to getting points. But Bob Knight will figure a way to beat Charlotte and figure a way to look ahead a little bit. But the most important thing is Andre Emmett, to me, is very explosive. This is a quick team defensively. They know how to defend, and they've come along very well in probably one of the toughest conferences in the country. They started the season early. They really exploded. And when you look at how Bob Knight can coach and how Andre Emmett has played, I think this team is going to surprise you, especially against Charlotte. And once they get past Charlotte, that 8-9 game looks to a St. Joe matchup. He is a genius if he gets to that and trying to figure out how to defend certain teams in the big game, and that is a big game for him.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Charlotte will not be easy, guys. I had Charlotte, and they can play, and certainly Bobby Lutz was my coach of the year on my website for that conference. He does a heck of a job, and Withers can play. But I agree with you, Digger. I think Emmett will be too much for them to handle inside.
All right, the 5-12 game, the Florida Gators, a team that lost the Danish defector Christian Dreyer, went to Europe to play pro ball in Spain. But since then, it's kind of given the Gators a cause. They say they've become closer as a team. Only losses in the span since Dreyer left have been to Kentucky, including one of them today. Let's take on Luis Flores and the Manhattan Jaspers.
Well, you know, this is a very dangerous game there for Florida because Manhattan last year played Syracuse very tough. They got a rising star in coaching and Bobby Gonzalez, 2 New Yorkers going head-to-head. I've said from day one Gonzalez will be the perfect hire for St. John's, has a passion and love for the city. Flores can flat-out play to transfer from Rutgers. But when it's all said and done, I think the competition of the SEC, Billy Donovan's kids have really played a lot better, got tighter, more chemistry. I think Roberson and Walsh, too much, Digger. I think they march on in a close battle.
What Florida's problem has been all year is the fact that they just don't have senior leadership.
I know what you mean.
This team is very, very young when you took a look at the sophomores and the juniors and how they play. Their guards can play, but sometimes they make poor decisions with turnovers. But Anthony Roberson, who had 35 points in that win against Vanderbilt, he can flat out play. And I love Matt Walsh when he gets it going. He can't go 1 for 15 the way he did against Alabama. But I think the key has got to be David Lee inside. He's got to find a way to establish points in the paint, and it'd be a lot tougher than he is. He doesn't take it to the rim that much. But in this first game against Manhattan, they will not get challenged inside like they would against a Kentucky as a physical defensive team inside. So the up and down game favors Florida. Their guards will love the up and down game, and I'm sure Bobby Gonzalez will try to play the zone, which means Florida can shoot the threes.
Any trouble in that 4-13 game for Wake Forest against Virginia Commonwealth and young coach Capel at age 29, a team that got blasted by Virginia Tech earlier this season. Any scare at all for Wake?
No, you know, I don't see any scare at all. I know they jumped out early. They were like 12-0, finished 8-9, lost their last 3 games, but you got to look at who they lost to. I think that Chris Paul will have a great start in the tournament. He's a diaper Danny with an incredible future. Bottom line is I think Wake Forest too strong there.
And Dustin Gray's one of those guards that just takes the game over, and he's been in a little semi-slump, but they are that good. I think Wake is well coached. Skip Prosser knows how to get it done. And when you look at Wake Forest, this is a very dangerous team, and I like the way their bracket is starting to shape up.
I think Richmond's a dangerous team. Let's go over to Reese, Jay, and Steve about that 6-11 game in the East Rutherford bracket.
Yeah, Chris, Richmond not only rewarded for their season, but also that road win at Kansas. And a couple probably of controversial type seeding places here. Wisconsin, despite beating Illinois, Sea-Line Lure, I've already gotten comments from Badger fans about this. What about Pittsburgh, Jay, at 3?
I thought Pittsburgh got absolutely jobbed. First to be a 3 seed, I thought they should have been up at a 2, but to have to play potentially Wisconsin in Milwaukee, that is unfair to a team as good good as Pittsburgh that's accomplished as much as the Panthers have accomplished.
But there is the question, will they play Wisconsin in the second round in Milwaukee? The Wisconsin-Richmond matchup.
I think it's a tough matchup for Wisconsin. First of all, Devin Harris is their leading scorer. He had 29 points against Illinois, but he's going to be guarded by a guy named Tony Dobbins. Tony Dobbins is one of the best defenders in the country. And remember, this Richmond team won at Kansas. They won at Colorado. They beat Xavier. Mike Scrocky can shoot it, but Dobbins can really defend. He's very athletic and long-armed.
And the Spiders have a history of being the giant killers. Great upsets. Dick Tarrant in '91 upsetting Syracuse in the East. So you don't know. And they've already won this year at Kansas. But I like Wisconsin because of Devin Harris. He's one of the premier guards in the country. They're playing in their own region. And Bo Ryan, I don't know what he has to do to get respect in his area in the Big Ten. His peers really respect him, but he's one of the best coaches in America, an unheralded program. As we look at Devin Harris right here, he can beat you off the dribble. Defensively, he pressures the ball. He gets out in transition, a very good athlete, and he's the leader. He's the extension of Coach Ryan on the floor. He's the go-to guy down the stretch, but he does a great job, for as gifted as he is, of getting his teammates involved. So across the board, he's a tremendous basketball player. I like Wisconsin.
And he makes big shots. He made 2 big threes against Michigan State, but I think the key to that game could be Mike Wilkinson, a guy who can step out and hit threes. He can guard multiple positions. He is a terrific player that doesn't get much credit.
So you're going Wisconsin here? You guys are in agreement?
I'll agree with him, but Richmond's going to scare him.
Cheeseheads move on in Wisconsin.
And right there, we got the home crowd behind them as well. The 7-10 matchup. Memphis and South Carolina. The Gamecocks suffering the loss of Orlando Howell, their big guy inside. Playing without him might have cost them a seed line or two, taking on one of the myriad Conference USA regular season champs.
Yeah, Memphis is a really good team. I think Memphis is led by Antonio Burks, who's the Conference USA Player of the Year. I've never seen a guy improve as much from one year to the next in his shooting as Antonio Burks. Coming into this season, Antonio Burks had made, I think it's 6 threes total. He's up over 50 this year, shot about 45% from 3. And they've also got Sean Banks, a 6'7" freshman, and he's arguably the best freshman in the country, certainly right there with some of the other great freshmen like Luol Deng and Chris Paul. He had a spectacular year for Memphis.
Yeah, I like Memphis as well in this game. Coach Calipari's done a tremendous job. Up-tempo, created a lot of excitement in Memphis, and this is a year they could make a run maybe to the Sweet 16. When you look at Antonio Burks, he's tremendous in terms of ball pressure. He also gets out in transition. He's another one of those little fire hydrants, as Jay likes to call him, right up there with Nate Robinson and Aaron Miles, some of the other quick little zipper, beep-beep, roadrunner kind of point guards that can change the complexion of a game with their speed. Also, Sean Banks, one of the spectacular freshmen who can beat you from long range. He's long, he's lanky, plays with a lot of poise, a lot of confidence for only being a freshman. So Memphis, very dangerous. I think they move forward in this tournament. Move on.
Although South Carolina is a good pressing team. You don't usually say that about a Dave Odom team, but they got out and pressed this year and forced a lot of turnovers, and they also protected the basket. You don't see a lot of teams that can press and at the same time protect the basket. Josh Gonner, junior college transfer, can really shoot it.
Yeah, he's been a great scorer for them this year. And Dave Odom, you guys mentioned him. He was selected by his peers as the Coach of the Year in the SEC. And Andy Katz joins us now. And Andy, there are some coaching matchups of intrigue around here.
Well, first of all, it's not just the teams moving on. When you look deeper into the NCAA tournament, there's a lot of coaches that really benefit over making winning a couple of games and making a big run. No one benefited more than Stan Heath. Remember when he was at Kent State? One season took them to the Elite Eight. Then Stan Heath got a big-time job, so he went to Arkansas. So Dick will love this one. Who are some of the hot names when you look at this bracket that could advance? Well, you start at Manhattan with Bobby Gonzalez, and he's in a bracket where he could win some games, especially against Florida, and everyone loves a 5-12 matchup. So Gonzalez is in a good position where he could win a couple of games and get a little bit more name recognition if Manhattan can advance. Matt Painter from Southern Illinois, he's talked a lot about potentially being Gene Katie's successor at Purdue. He played at Purdue. The problem with Southern Illinois right now is they're going to have to play against a team like Alabama, playing Alabama, and it's a very hot team right now, so it may be a little more difficult for him to advance. Joe Scott has been a hot coach, turning around Air Force. He's been mentioned, thrown around. New York papers are throwing him around for the St. John's job. Probably a little bit of a reach, but Joe Scott got the toughest first-round matchup of any of these aspiring young coaches because he's going to have to play North Carolina, who could potentially go to the Final Four. Chris?
There are plenty of coaches at quote-unquote big schools that made their names by winning at mid-majors in the NCAA tournament. A lot more. We've got 2 more regions to devour, predictions to show you. But we continue our countdown now of the top moments in the last 25 years on ESPN. 1995 was not a vintage year for Duke basketball, but they hook up in a classic with their arch rivals from 8 miles away.
The Cameron Crazies are up. The first time Duke has been out of the national polls to play North Carolina in 11 years.
Oh, they're awesome tonight, baby, with a capital A. Ram Jam Slam. Oh, America, are you serious? Duke has really picked up their game here. Oh, nice pass. Way to look.
This is incredible. Tied at 81. 8 seconds.
Penetration, spinning away. McGinnis.
Basketball, 1 second.
We're going on 2. That's the way it's supposed to be. Let it go 3 overtimes 5. I want this to go all night.
With only 4 seconds left, if you miss the free throw, I mean, all you can do is take it and throw it down court. They got a chance.
He lets it fly. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
How about 3 overtimes, Dick?
Why not? Let's go for it.
Huge shot by Donald Williams, and then the steal.
Oh, what a play on the inbounds of the basketball.
It's a 2-point game.
Tire to win.
Wojciechowski. Most magnificent games we've ever had the privilege to see.
Are you kidding me? This team knows how to play, and they know how good they are, and it's darn good.
That's right, Jay. They were darn good all season. The small school from West Philly, the tiny campus, providing so much intrigue for this college basketball season. They're rewarded with the #1 seed. But the poll question is, will St. Joseph's advance to the Final Four out of that East Rutherford bracket, which also features Oklahoma State, Pittsburgh, and Wake Forest? Go to ESPN.com and vote. I'm guessing there's going to be plenty of skeptics. Joining us right now, Phil Martelli, the coach of St. Joseph's. Coach, you don't really have to defend yourself against critics, but I'm going to give you a chance anyway, because there's people out there that say, I can't buy the Hawks as a 1 seed because on a neutral floor, teams like Pittsburgh and Connecticut and Mississippi State and Oklahoma State would be better than your team. How do you answer that?
Well, I would say this committee studies as much data as anybody physically can, and they decided that this is what we are, that we're a #1 seed. So for people to be talking and all this empty nonsense, it's really kind of a waste of energy, and it's time to play. Enough talking, let's play.
Phil, they starting to love me again in Philly, right? Phil, a little bit? Just a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're way ahead, Digger. You're way. In fact, you know what? When I drive by the Pico building today, your name will be in lights, believe me.
After the thing that happened to you with Xavier, what concerns do you have going in based on what didn't work in that game?
Well, the biggest thing was when we kind of traveled the next day and a half and just kind of watching these guys, as you well know, Digger and Dick, that I watched their eyes and their bodies, and they felt sorry for themselves. And my point all along was we did that. Xavier played great, but we did that to ourselves. We didn't play. We didn't guard, which was the biggest thing. We put everybody on an island and let them get they were dribbling wherever they wanted to go. So what I did yesterday was I went back and practiced the first practice of the year. I did it exactly to the minute, exactly the same teams, the same matchups. Today we did the second practice of the year, and I told them when we got here tonight that this is for celebration, tomorrow's for preparation. But Saturday and Sunday I used to kind of like flush them out emotionally, and I thought they did a really nice job of responding to that.
You know, Phil, what I want to ask you is, psychologically, how important it was for you and your kids to be a #1 seed?
Well, Dick, to be honest with you, it wasn't. It wasn't a psychological. I told the team when we left our last meeting in Dayton on Thursday night was I didn't want to hear any discussion about the seed. It would be what it would be, and we would have to play a game. But I wanted an anger. I wanted a chip. I wanted an attitude that we couldn't wait to get to our next game, whether we were the 8th seed or the 2nd seed or the 1st seed, if they were sending us to St. Louis or Buffalo, wherever. I wanted an attitude because the taste that we left in our own mouths about how poorly we played couldn't last. I will say this, though. Now that it's been a #1 seed, it was what I thought would happen. In the back of my head when I wondered about it, the adrenaline rush, they're ready to go. And we're actually going to meet again later tonight around 11:30 just to discuss the logistics and then practice tomorrow. But everybody here is obviously elated and really excited. Still have to play on Thursday, though.
Hey, Phil, I'm going to be the agent, and I am going to right now book Digger to speak at your banquet.
Well, that's what I was saying to Digger off the air. April the 23rd in this field house. The only other thing, Dick, is they've asked me to ask him to be the commencement speaker.
No,
we
I'll
can't
do both.
afford you, but we would like to have Digger.
I'll do both. I want to do that banquet on the 23rd. We'll do it for charity, and if I can get an honorary doctorate, I'll do commencement also.
Wow.
Hey, Phil, it's Jay Billis. Phil, it's Jay Billis.
Yes, Jay.
I wanted to ask you a question about one of the weaknesses people say that your team has is rebounding, and if you had to play against a drop-dead three-man that could put it on the floor, take you to the basket, or post up one of your smaller guards. I don't happen to see any of those type of teams in your sub-region. Is that something that you would worry about in a tournament setting?
Well, Jay, I'll tell you all along, I've always been worried about big, strong perimeter guys. This idea that size is going to hurt us, I just don't buy it, because I just don't think there's that guy that exists in college that much. And this idea of rebounding, it's because the other team has missed a lot of shots. We play really good defense. We haven't fouled. We haven't gotten into a lot of trouble with N1s on the offensive rebounds. We got hammered again on the glass by Xavier, but the fact was we missed so many shots that there were a lot of rebounds for them and really none for us, because they made every shot. What you described, that big, powerful wingman, particularly if anybody wants to call him a 3, that's the guy that I have the greatest concern with. We could do nothing against Romain Sada this time around. The first time, we did a real reasonable job and we beat them in Cincinnati, but this time we couldn't. That's the team that concerns me the most, the big, physical perimeter team.
Phil, this is Andy Katz. We're going to put you on a little bit on the spot, like you're on the selection committee. Richmond, one of the last at-large teams in the field, they got an 11 seed. Why should the Spiders have been included in this field?
Well, because I think what they did is they took a chance. They went on the road. They went to Colorado. They went to Kansas. They have those big wins at those two places. A lot of people that were in that mix, I don't know enough about all the schedules, Andy. Only you would know that. But to know that they went on the road and won those games, and, you know, I have to put up my chest out a little bit, because the Atlantic 10 has been kind of kicked to the curb all year long, and here we are sitting with 4 teams in the tournament.
Phil, I want to give you a chance to address America. Once again, we're having fun on ESPN.com. Fans voting. Will St. Joe's go to the Final Four? 88% don't think he can do it. You get the Texas Tech or Charlotte winner. You have teams like Florida, Wake Forest, perhaps Pittsburgh, Oklahoma State, Wisconsin. What do you got America against you again.
All we can do then in Philadelphia is worry about Jim Thomey's injury. You know what? You know what the problem is? Most of the people in Philadelphia don't know how to use a computer, so they couldn't vote.
That's a good answer. Hey, Phil, thanks for your time. Best of luck the first-round game against the Liberty Flames, Buffalo, on Thursday. All right, we'll come back. Moment number 7 in our countdown to the top 10 moments as voted on by you in ESPN's 25 seasons.
ESPN is going to give a scholarship, room, board, tuition, and I'll tell you what, Robin, I'll throw in the books, baby. If this guy here, Corey Klaus, who was picked out, has to make a half-court shot. Now let's let it fly, Corey. Cheer him on! Cheer him on! Get it go! You gotta be unbelievably excited. You got a scholarship, baby! A scholarship!
What a way to begin the season here on ESPN.
Bracketology 101. Again, we're counting down all the way to the Final Four national championship predictions. We're still in the first round. We're going to go to the St. Louis region, where Kentucky was deemed the #1 overall seed. They'll have to wait to find out who they're going to play, Lehigh or Florida A&M, the team that got in with a losing record. The only team that in history, by the way, that's ever gotten into the tournament twice with a losing record. The second round opponent for Kentucky is going to be either Washington or UAB. And let's talk about that 8-9 game taking place in Columbus, Dick. The Blazers, as you mentioned, they certainly played a very tough schedule in Conference USA, mixed success.
Yeah, they really do. They got some good guard play as well. And you look at Washington, very young team with an explosive little guy, certainly in Robinson, and came on strong at the end of the year. I mean, that club beat Arizona 3 times. No one has ever beaten Arizona 3 times since Lute Olson's been the coach there. Bottom line is, I, though, give a slight edge to Mike Anderson and UAB. Like Finley in the backcourt, I really believe that playing in Conference USA, tough competition all year from top to bottom, I give them the edge, Mr. Phelps.
Well, I got to disagree with Mr. Vitale, only because I like the way the University of Washington has played the last part of this season. Their last 15 games, they made some statements. Yeah, they beat Arizona twice. and they knocked off #1 Stanford. But I was impressed with the way Nate Robinson just takes the game over, knows how to make things happen. He is very explosive. He scored 11 of his last 20 points in the last 6 minutes of the game the other night in the Pac-10 tournament. But the fact is this: when you look how they played at NC State, they lost by 5, and then they went out and beat Arizona on the road. No one's given Washington the respect yet that they have. I think this is a solid team. He's going to be tough to handle, and I look for Washington to move on against UAB.
Team that many people believe was on the wrong side of the bubble just a week and a half ago comes in seeded #8. You guys different opinion on that?
No,
I'll go with UAB. Now you took UAB and you took Washington.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. You got to break the tie.
Well, you know, they beat Arizona 3 times, right. Diggers Club, Washington, but I just like UAB because of the tough competition that they had to face in that Conference USA in every game. And I think Michael Anderson's club, very underrated, underheralded, and I'll tell you this, that guard can play, Finley.
Well, I love Nate Robinson, the guard for the Huskies, but we're going to break the tie.
He's a football
UAB
player.
around. Yeah, that's why, exactly. The 5-12 game, Ryan Gomes and the Providence Friars will take on Pacific. Now, Pacific's a team that won 15 in a row. They beat Cal State Northridge, the Cinderella team. They really had to hang on there in that conference final, or else they might have had to sweat it out. Small team. They lost to Duke by 13. They played St. Joseph's early, lost to them by 18. Is this a scare at all for the Friars?
Well, you know, I think the Friars really got to regroup and get Gomes going again. Bottom line is they finished the season on a down note, lost their last 3. Timmy Welsh's club earlier in the year and in the middle of the year was playing super basketball. They got to get back playing the game they're capable. They should have too much for Bob Thomason, a veteran coach who's done a great job with that program at Pacific. My heart goes out to Utah State. That's the only team I look out there and I say, Heartbreak Hotel, not part of the big dance as a mid-major.
Let's go back to Providence again, why they've got 3 straight losses. They got really beat up at home when they played Pitt. And then, of course, Boston College comes in and knocks them out. And then they lose to Villanova in the Big East tournament. And what has happened? Ryan Gomes has just got to go back to where he gets his double-doubles. He hasn't had a double-double since the St. John's game, and he can make things happen inside. But against BC, he was 4 for 15, and Cobb and McGrath went 6 for 24 in the perimeter. This is a solid team. Timmy Welsh loves to live with that 2-3 zone, and I still think this is a very dangerous team. But now that they've lost 3 straight, they've got their chance to go back in and just regroup and get it going. They'll play that 2-3 zone, and the fact is, when you look at Ryan Gomes, he's one of the toughest players in the country inside with a double-double potential.
Well, he made my all Rolls-Royce team, and I picked my top 5 players in America. I got Gomes on my first team. That's how good I think he is. I think the Big East really has gotten respect this year, finally. Last year they didn't get any. Bottom line is that conference has been so tough all year from top to bottom.
We'll see if the Friars can get recharged after that late season slump. Remember, in these 5-12 games, that 15 out of the last 16 years, at least one of the 12s has beaten one of the 5s. These guys don't think that Providence is that 5 going down. Let's go over to the other guys.
All right, Chris, in the 6-11 game, he's also a particular popular pick for an upset there. And in this bracket in the St. Louis region, Boston College against Utah. Utah not only with the late season surge, but they've got a coach named Rupp now instead of Majerus. That should help.
Yeah, Kerry Rupp. But Utah's lost a lot of games. I think they're a good team, not a great team. They're led by Nick Jacobson, who's an outstanding shooter. Andrew Bogut is a freshman inside who's a big-time scorer, and he can rebound as well. And Tim Frost has been playing really with vicious injuries all season long. I think Utah is capable of beating Boston College. Boston College is a team, you look at them, you wonder how they win. I mean, they just get out and guard you. They don't really shoot it. They don't have a ton of great athletes. Jarrett Dudley is a freshman, and one of the better freshmen in the country. Is another guy who's a glue guy. He just gets things done. He's not ultra quick. He's not a great athlete, but he just finds a way to do it. And I think Craig Smith is one of the unheralded big guys in the country. Balletic footwork underneath, a big-time scorer, double-double guy every game.
Yeah, Coach Al Skinner's glad he has Craig Smith going into the NCAA tournament. Coach Skinner should be commended. He built the Rhode Island program, and now at Boston College in a season where they were picked 9th by most preseason experts in the magazines to go to maybe the NIT. But because of this man right here, Craig Smith, going to work, he could put it on the deck. Very good footwork for a player his size, and with a player of that kind of strength, he's very difficult to defend and tough matchup, and that opens up their inside-outside attack. But hats off to Al Skinner, a team where people thought they'd be in the NIT. There was a lot of heat on him up there in Boston, and he has got this program in the right direction, just like he did with Rhode Island.
And Craig Smith, the guy from Los Angeles, and nobody recruited him in LA.
Fairfax High School.
How did that happen?
Fairfax High School. Harvey
UCLA
Katani.
didn't recruit him. USC didn't recruit him.
And what happens when Craig Smith puts on the sneakers and takes the floor? What happens, Jay?
Double-double.
Double-double. Every time. Can I get any love in that 3-14 game? You know, Northern Iowa, Georgia Tech. The last time Northern Iowa was in the tournament, they were a 14 seed. They beat Missouri 1990. I can't get anything from there?
Luke Schencher.
Okay.
Luke Schencher.
Then if I can't get any result from there, then maybe we'll go on down to 7-10, Michigan State and Nevada. Right there, the Spartans, not a typical Spartan team. They're winning in different ways, not really with the defense and rebounding we've seen before.
Yeah, Michigan State. Can you imagine this? I'm going to say this about Michigan State. They don't defend and they don't rebound. But what they can do is shoot. And I think Tom Izzo's done a remarkable job of building back this team's confidence in their character and thinking that they can win again after they took so many lumps. I mean, they were 0-8 against the top 25 this season, only won one game against the top 50. They're not a great rebounding team like they've always been, and they're not a great defensive team because they give up so much off the dribble. They retreat almost to inside the three-point line to keep you from getting in off the dribble. But they are a team that can really shoot. And Chris Hill, one of the best shooters in the country, they are knocking down perimeter shots. Paul Davis is a guy, though, inside that can get it going in a hurry.
Yeah, Paul Davis is a real factor, and people have talked all year long. It's no secret that Michigan State lacks the true point guard. Since Mateen Cleats left, they haven't filled that void at the quarterback. But let's not forget this big fella right here who can step away and knock down shots, got a great touch. He's become more physical, stepped up to the challenge, no longer a cupcake or a softie. Tom Izzo challenged him, and he stepped up. Also, Tom Izzo in the month of March, 19-5, the best winning percentage of any active coach in America come tournament time. And last year, they didn't have a true point guard. They ended up going to the Final Eight. They have deficiencies, but they are a dangerous team. I don't think any team is looking forward to playing Michigan State or Tom Izzo come tournament time.
Well, they're going to have some danger with Nevada because Kirk Snyder is the real deal. I mean, he can play. He's going to be a pro.
You got Nevada?
Yeah. No, I'm not saying Nevada's going to win. It's going to be close. Wow. I'm not saying Nevada, Nevada can't win because they can, but Kirk Snyder, Gary Hill-Thomas, that team can play. They beat Kansas at Nevada. They're a good team.
And the survivor of that game, we believe, will get Gonzaga. Gonzaga, they don't want to be called Cinderella. They don't really like it much when you call them mid-major. Now, Mr. Mid-Major is here. Andy Katz. Andy, there are a few mid-majors in this region that perhaps could cause some trouble.
That's right. I mean, no one likes this term, and there really are more mid-major teams than mid-major conferences. But for the first time since 1979, we really could have a mid-major team get to the Final Four. Remember in 1979? Larry Bird and Indiana State, and Penn was also in that Final Four. No mid-major team has gotten there since 79, and we could have two possibly this season. Certainly St. Joseph's, they got a #1 seed, so they've got plenty of advantages. And anyone out there that says they're not a mid-major, go check out their facilities. They are low-major facilities, and they are now looking like a #1. They got a #1 seed, so they've got a great shot to get there because they have a favorable bracket. But Gonzaga, they're in the bracket of Kentucky. This is their best team, much what Mark Few was saying, and they have their highest seed ever as a #2 seed. If it plays out, they'll have to get through Kentucky to get to the Final Four. Certainly there are other mid-majors that could win a couple of games like Western Michigan. The bracket could open up for them, but this could be the year for the first time since 79. I see Dick, he wants to get a word in here, that it could have a mid-major team in there, Gonzaga or St. Joe's. Dick, Chris?
Hey, you can't have peripheral vision when you work with these guys. You got to focus straight ahead.
Hey, Andy, I love you, big fella, but there's no way you're telling me that St. Joe's, with its tradition, is mid-major out of the Atlantic 10?
Have you been to the facility?
I don't care about the facility. I care about results
Phil's office
and players.
Is a closet.
Come on.
It's
We're not talking
facilities. They're a mid-major.
Oh, mid-major.
They're a mid-major. Is Fordham a major? High major?
Who?
Fordham.
Fordham.
They're a mid-major.
When Digger was there, there was no mid-major there. Come on, Richard.
We were the best.
St. Joe's mid-major.
Terminology.
St. Joe's mid-major.
No, we're all big time. We're all in the big bracket.
Mid-major.
Andy with the million-minute cell phone plan that only works in mid-major area codes. Coming up, we'll talk to the coach of Pittsburgh. They don't feel very good about their seed, sliding down to a #3. And also, Mike Montgomery of the Stanford Cardinal will join us coming up on Bracketology 101. Region. Seems silly not to just call it the West. Why not keep the geographic labels? I predict they'll go back to that next year. Stanford against UT San Antonio in the 116 game. The Roadrunners out of the Southland Conference. Alabama against the Southern Illinois Salukis, who dominated the Missouri Valley all season long, slipped up in the conference tournament with 25 wins. Pretty easy for the committee to put them in. You can see based on their seed at a 9. How do you see Alabama and Southern Illinois, Dick?
Well, I'll tell you, Alabama really's played a tough schedule, played in a tough SEC. Mr. Gottfried, by playing that tough schedule, got himself a bid. Bottom line is Winston Kennedy can flat out play. There's no question about that. He can really play. It's Kennedy. Is it Kennedy Winston?
Kennedy Winston.
Kennedy Winston.
Or Winston Kennedy.
Kennedy Winston can flat out play. There's no doubt about it. Reese Davis is smiling. He's an Alabama grad. And certainly Ernest Shelton is underrated. He can really score big. So with Winston and with Shelton, I think that combination is going to be too tough for the Salukis, and I really believe they move on.
Well, the Salukis, to me, have a great defensive team. Is going to see how they defend against an Alabama team that's really starting to mature. They got a lot of young players, but when you look inside, Kennedy Winston has got to have his A game on. He can play in this game a double-double scenario. He's not afraid to go to the hole. He's very strong, and they just really blend in and just know when to go. They got quick athletes that know how to go to the hole, and I really think that this is a chance now for Alabama to make a move to the first round into the second round. When you look at Southern Illinois, though, they are the team that came in as an at-large from the Missouri Valley Conference. And I think this could be a dangerous game, but when you look at teams that blend in and play against each other, I think Alabama, because of the toughness of the SEC conference schedule, has got them ready to move in the NCAA
Well, you know,
tournament.
we mentioned that tandem certainly with Kennedy Winston and Shelton, but the bottom line is Coach Godfrey learned a lesson relating to this tournament, learned a lesson several years ago, didn't play a tough pre-conference schedule, and he paid the price for it, didn't get in a tournament. He changed his whole philosophy, went out there, played the better clubs, and he now is rewarded by getting a chance to play.
And it's a big game, I think, for the Missouri Valley Conference. To get the at-large bid, to get the 9 seed, a chance against an SEC team that really has proven it can play with anybody to pull off that upset and perhaps set up a matchup with Stanford in the second round. Now, the 5-12 game in Denver as BYU gets to stay right there in Denver where they played and lost to the Mountain West Conference tournament against Syracuse. BYU has by far the best non-conference win of any Mountain West team, a team that has not had success in recent NCAA tournaments. They beat Oklahoma State. They take on the defending champs.
Well, they beat Oklahoma State, and they got a really dynamite big guy, Afiel Arajo. This guy can play on the inside, and he can give some problems to Syracuse. However, I think the 2-3 zone, Jerry McNamara's ability to shoot, playing in the tournament, that experience, winning experience, and Hakeem Warwick is playing as good as any forward in America right now. So I give the edge. Big East, Syracuse, Jim Boeheim.
Well, when you look at Jim Boeheim and Syracuse, they were there last year, and a lot of these kids know that. When you look at Jerry McNamara in the year he had a year ago, he ran into a little slump mid-season, and once he finds his threes, he's as good as anybody in the country. But when he makes his move and he gets in balance, he takes the pressure off inside. I think Josh Pace has got to come up and play a little bit better for them. Hakeem Warwick is as good as anybody in the country going one-on-one to the basket. But when McNamara can make moves inside to Greg Forth, this zone is tough to beat. Boeheim plays it so well, and these guys, remember last year, no one expected them to get to the East Regional and win it, expect them to get to the Final Four and win it. So Boeheim will have these guys ready to go. But to me, Jerry McNamara is the leader of this team, and he just has that edge to get these other guys fired up. They're going to be tough to beat.
Practice with me. Afa Araujo. Afa Araujo. He's a tough guy from Bitter.
Hey, let me tell you this. Wait a minute now. Wait a minute now. I'm a little brain dead right now, man. I've been traveling in a plane. I did a game.
Okay,
Araujo. I mean, I call him AA.
The Mountain West Conference is going to be scrutinized by people around the country who are skeptics. They get the 3 teams in. You get Air Force Carolina. That's going to be a tough one. Utah, Boston College, BYU, Syracuse might be the best chance to win. It's not a conference that's produced more than 1 win in any NCAA tournament in the last 4 years. Haven't got a team to the Sweet 16, so something to keep an eye on. Afa Araujo, Reese. You guys got that over there?
Afa Araujo.
Afa Araujo. You got it, Jay? You're on top of no.
It's Ralph Araujo.
Yeah, we're
in the United States.
You're going to call him Ralph now. The 6-11 matchup in the Phoenix bracket, or maybe, Chris, I may get on the bandwagon with you. The region formerly known as the West and perhaps will be known again. Vanderbilt, with Vanderbilt's inclusion, now every team from the SEC has made the NCAA tournament since the 2001 season. They face the Mac Daddies, Western Michigan. This conference, a history of pulling upsets, whether it's Wally Serbiak or Stan Heath's Kent State team.
Well, Western Michigan's a really good team. They've beaten UAB. They've beaten Arizona State. I mean, they're solid, and they're led by a guy named Mike Williams, who's not a tremendous athlete. He's not a great perimeter shooter, but he's a guy who just knows how to play. He was the MAC Player of the Year. They've also got Ben Reed, who can shoot the ball from deep. He's a really good player. And Anthony Kahn, who's a guy who's had some double-doubles in the MAC Conference tournament. I think Western Michigan's a really dangerous team. And if I were Kevin Stallings and Vanderbilt, I wouldn't have wanted to draw them. But Vanderbilt's a team, they run, I don't want to say it's a Princeton-style offense, but they run a lot of handoff cuts. And if you play them a certain way up top on those handoffs, they'll go backdoor on you. And he's done a great job with that team. I think Mario Moore is one of their best players and a guy that really makes them go.
Yeah, Kevin Stallings was an assistant for Gene Cady and also Roy Williams. And to build on Jay's point, has a very good feel at the offensive end of the floor. And this Vanderbilt team has responded mostly in part because of Matt Freege, a senior, 6'9", and in Coach Stallings' Vanderbilt offense, he has the versatility with their great spacing to play both inside and out. They can move him around to take advantage of matchups as we see him put the ball on the floor here and knock it down off the glass. I think Vanderbilt moves on, although Steve Hawkins has done a tremendous job at Western Michigan, a great magical season for them. There is a history in the MAC of upsets. You look at Ball State, Detroit, Kent State, but I think in this first rounder, Vandy moves on.
Detroit. Who did Detroit get?
That's right. Those Bruins. The David Bruins and Goliath. The Hoosier Dome was never good for the Bruins. Something about the picket fence, the Hoosiers.
Detroit was better in the
Princeton,
70s.
Detroit.
Detroit was better.
You know
in the
what?
70s.
Detroit's never recovered.
They were unbeatable in the 70s.
Yeah. You look at the 7-10 matchup in this region. DePaul and Dayton. Don't tell me the committee doesn't have a sense of humor when you start looking toward that second round matchup potentially of Lado against Calhoun. But first, the Blue Demons have to get past Dayton.
Well, Dave Lado's done a really good job with this team. They're led by a freshman, Sammy Mejia, who's 6'6". He can look over defenses. Delonte Holland is a guy that can put the ball on the floor. He's got a great mid-range game. And they've been so much better when Andre Brown has been back. But in Dayton, they're playing a team that's got great size. And Dayton's got good guards. But I think more importantly, Keith Walaskowski, Sean Finn, those guys are really good inside. Walaskowski's never gotten the credit he deserves.
Yeah, big fella, and he's going to be a problem, obviously, something they have to consider when DePaul looks at their matchups and how they're going to defend him inside. But again, Dave Lado, building on Jay's point once again, tremendous job at, of turning this program around. Andre Brown down low. They've played lights out since his return. They struggled early in the season without him, but now they're 10-1, playing extremely well. The Blue Demons bringing back the memories of Terry Cummings and Clyde Bradshaw and some of the other great Blue Demons of the past under Ray Meyer. But this is going to be an interesting matchup. Very, close, evenly matched game. But I think DePaul moves on.
Let me say something about the top of the bracket. We talk about Stanford struggling at times with really quick teams. Look at the matchups they've got, potentially playing Alabama, Maryland, and UConn. I think Stanford had a really tough draw at the top of that bracket.
Yeah, it's all about matchups in this thing, and certainly some players who create those matchups have increased or improved their stock as we go along. What about some player stock, Andy?
Well, that's right, Reese. We talked about coaches who could move on if they advance. Well, certainly players really do benefit from playing well in the NCAA tournament. And a lot of NBA GMs will be watching very closely. Remember Dante Jones. Now, he had some academic issues, but certainly he played himself into a first-round draft pick by leading Mississippi State to the 1996 Final Four. So who are some other guys that really could play themselves into a potential high draft pick if they want to go to the Chicago pre-draft camp? Well, the St. Joe's Hawks are a little concerned that Delonte West is going to do what Jameer Nelson did last season and experiment with the Chicago pre-draft camp. If he has a hot tournament, he may make that decision. Josh Childress at Stanford. He was the Pac-10 Player of the Year. He certainly is already being talked about as a lottery pick. If he leads Stanford to the Final Four or the national title, Childress will certainly skyrocket on NBA GM's list. Ryan Gomes from Providence. He's been a late bloomer for the Friars, but he has played himself into being a potential pro. And if he is successful in the NCAA tournament, he may start to think about the NBA draft. The Providence Friar coaching staff is a little concerned about that. At Wisconsin, the Big Ten Player of the Year, Devin Harris. His family's already starting to flirt and starting to talk about maybe declaring for the draft to try to test the process and go to Chicago. He's already had a great run. If he continues this, he may look at declaring for the draft. And Lawrence Roberts, when he went to Mississippi State, he originally talked about this being only one and done. That may happen now that he's the SEC Player of the Year. And certainly if he leads Mississippi State to the Final Four, he may look at the NBA as well. So we talked about coaches, and there's certainly players that benefit by advancing in the NCAA tournament.
Good point, Andy. I'm sure the NBA scouts will be looking at those tournament games, but unfortunately they're going to be scouting the high school state tournaments as well. That's where they're really scouting. What are they saying? 8 to 10 guys skipping college altogether and going right to the NBA. Conventional wisdom defied just a bit, and see some of the teams that did not get in and some that did. We'll talk to the chairman of the Selections Committee, Bob Bowlesby, when we come back on our NCAA Selection Special.
We only been through one round.
Reddick's got to take a shot. He fires it up. He got it!
You ain't nothing if you can't get past the first round. We'll break down the second round. To the Sweet 16, to the Elite 8, all the way to the Final Four. Stick around. Dick, Digger, and the boys will take you all the way to the national championship game.
Great house.
So the matchups in just a second, but first, these are the folks that are feeling snubbed on this day. Utah State lost in his conference tournament, 25 wins, not enough. Notre Dame had 9 Big East wins, Colorado 10 Big 12 wins. Florida State was 6-10 in the strongest conference. LSU really suffered with Jaime Laredo, their best player, and they struggle without him down the stretch. Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Virginia, and Michigan also not getting invitations. Some of those not very controversial. Some of them are. Which do you think is the number one snub? Who's got the strongest case of being angry at the committee about not getting in?
Well, I would probably say Utah State. I think Utah State certainly has a legitimate argument after the kind of year they had and then getting upset. The bottom line is, though, I do understand what the committee's facing. You're rewarding, the definition says, the best 34 available teams, and you have to look at the fact of who people play. Having been a mid-major when I was at Detroit, I always realized that you got one basic shot. You have to win your tournament. If you don't win your tournament, you're in big trouble.
If you look at the big conferences, I always felt that when you win 10 games in a conference, like Colorado did in the Big 12, 10-6 is enough to get them in. I look at Notre Dame at 9-7. They played the only team in the Big East that had to play Pittsburgh twice, Syracuse twice, as well as UConn twice. They get penalized because they played the tougher schedule, and if they had 10 or 11 wins, they would have gotten in as an at-large.
They did have a tough schedule, but they knew showing up in New York, they needed a quality win probably to boost themselves. Could not come up with that in the Big East tournament.
They had to beat Connecticut.
Right.
Definitely had to beat Connecticut without Okafor.
Well, let's bring in the man who chaired the committee that had what many believe was the toughest job ever of seeding and selecting this bracket. Bob Bowlesby is the AD at Iowa, but also the chair of the selection committee. Bob, thanks for taking time. Best 34 at large. You guys always say that. But what does best mean? Does that mean, in the opinion of those guys in the room, the teams like Notre Dame or Florida State could not beat Air Force or UTEP on a neutral court? What does best mean?
Well, it means a lot of different things, and it probably even means different things to different people within the committee. But more than anything else, we're going to look at how they played throughout the year, how they played in the tournament, how they did against the top of the league, and how they did against the bottom. As you know, there are a lot of the conferences that don't play double round robins, so it depends on who they made their resume against and how they played against the schedule they were given. Where you have some control over who you play, we're certainly looking for institutions to go out and schedule some people. And ultimately, the biggest thing this year was we had 75 teams with 20 or more wins and a bunch of people that had 19, 18, and 17 that all had good resumes. And unfortunately, we have to get it down to 65.
Are there differences of opinion in the room when it comes to maybe seeding a team, one, St. Joseph's versus a Connecticut or a Pittsburgh? I mean, is it a reward for a regular season, or is it the determination of the committee that this team would beat that team if they played head-to-head?
Well, I think we came into this weekend with probably 10 or 11 that thought they might have a chance to make a case for the top line. Obviously, we're in a changing environment with lots of different conditions during the course of the weekend, but we feel very good about the first line. I just think that when you go through the regular season 27-0, and when you play not a good schedule, but the #1 non-conference schedule in college basketball, that's worthy of some attention. And obviously, the folks at St. Joe's are not real proud of their showing in the tournament, but we certainly felt like there were several that deserved that last spot on the line one, and ultimately, due to a lot of different factors, St. Joe's was the ones that got it.
Well, when I look at the bracket and I see Pittsburgh as a 3 seed, I don't disagree with you maybe on a 3 seed, but then it's almost like, well, all right, they're going to go to Wisconsin. Why do they have to go to Milwaukee?
Well, it's a good question. You know, we protect lines 1 through 5 so that they don't get in a situation where they have a hostile crowd with a lower seed. But we don't protect them beyond the first round, and we don't protect beyond the 5 seed. And so this is going to be a difficult environment. You know, I think in Pitt's case, the losing 2 out of 3 to UConn, and then being in a situation where they had a non-conference schedule that was over 240, we just felt like the sequencing was pretty good to have UConn on line 2 and Pitt on line 3. And when you get right down to it, I'm not sure who you're going to take off line 2. Mississippi State Gonzaga and Oklahoma State all have pretty good credentials right along with UConn.
Well, you know, Bob, the problem I have right there, and I thought the committee did a phenomenal job, set it on top of the show, because as you said, there was so much parity. But my real problem is with Pittsburgh. Here you are, number 3 seed, and you're going out to play out in Milwaukee. I think that's totally unfair, number one. And number two, my other problem is, and I want to ask you this, were the number 1 seeds completed before Oklahoma State won the Big 12?
Yes, absolutely, they were completed, Dick. We have to get to the point at some point in time in the afternoon where we have to move on. We have a number of different bracketing procedures that have been put in place over a long period of time, and those things don't just fall together over in a matter of minutes. We have to. We started the bracketing process at about 2:40, and it took us almost until 4 o'clock to get it done, and that didn't even include all of the site designations. And so it's a lot more than just slapping them onto the S curve and then sending them out someplace to play. This process takes a little while, and those of us in the Big 10 and in the Big 12 understand that we take the television exposure and we take the money, but there's also a downside to playing that late, and we just can't take into full consideration a game that gets over at 5:30 when we go on the air to announce the bracket at 6 o'clock. It's just not logistically feasible.
Bob, it's Reese Davis, and I know Digger's going to get mad at me about this question, but Air Force only 3 top 50 wins, none in the top 25. 6 of their wins, I believe, against teams ranked 300 or below in the RPI. What gave them the edge in that room over, say, Utah State?
Well, it's a good question, and I'll give you one more element to it. Air Force also had a non-conference schedule that was 317. They got in, unlike a lot of other teams over a long period of time, they got in spite of their record. And the reason they did is because they won the 7th toughest league in the United States. They had to beat 2 other NCAA tournament teams to do it, and they won that conference regular season championship by 2 full games. And we just felt like that was a pretty significant achievement and a pretty significant demonstration that they're a capable basketball team.
Bob, thanks for joining us. We appreciate peeling away some of the layers of secrecy of this process. I think it's pro-fan in the long run. Now, you may not disagree, but the committee in recent years, especially this year, becoming more open about the process. One of the disappointed coaches, although we'll find out if he was counting on that NCAA at-large bid, is Mike Bray of Notre Dame. The Irish did have 9 wins in the Big East, did play a very tough Big East schedule as far as the luck of the draw. Mike, your initial reaction to being snubbed this year?
Well, you know, we're certainly a little disappointed, but, you know, we've been realistic ever since our loss in the Garden to Connecticut and been trying to prepare our guys mentally for the NIT. And, of course, when some things happened over the last 2 days, you have a little bit of hope again. But I'm proud of our group that we made a run at this thing, because we were 4-5 in the league, 10-9, and Terrin Francis went down with a back injury. I didn't think we'd have suspense on Selection Sunday. I was hoping we'd just play our way into the NIT. So, you know, we're looking forward to that challenge of the NIT.
If you had to look back on the season in the Big East, what game really, as you take a look to see where you could have gone and what didn't happen, say 1 or 2 games that hurt you in the Big East?
Well, you know, Digger, so much has been made, and you know, you and I have talked about it a lot. Certainly our Providence game here at home, the Connecticut game the other night. I'll tell you 3 games that would have been just any one of them would have been powerful, that really would have helped us. Pitt twice and Kentucky once. You know, 2 of them here, 1 on the road at Pittsburgh. If you got any one of those, I think you could have been 8-8 with our schedule and had a heck of an argument. But we didn't do that. You know, we did finish 9-7. I'm very proud of our group because our rotation has been harder than most. In a lot of ways, the new league format and the new TV contract kind of put us in the most challenging schedule. Now, you want to play on national TV, and we had 13 exposures, more than Connecticut and Syracuse. And Digger, you know more than anybody, our brand turns on TVs. And now that we have a pretty good basketball program, it really turns on TVs. But that probably swallowed us a little bit, the difficulty of the league schedule. And then our non-league schedule, you know, I think we really went out and challenged ourselves. So that was challenging. It probably took a lot out of us.
Do you think if you had Francis, you know, if he was healthy, would that have made a difference the way you finished the season up? I know you guys played very, very well, but against Providence or even UConn in the Garden, would France has been a difference?
Well, you know, Coach, it brings up a good point because so many people started saying when we got on that little run without him, you know, I saw one Big East assistant quoted as saying, they're better without him. And let's be real honest here. This guy was a double-double guy. He was actually voted honorable mention All Big East, and he only played in 8 games. That's what the other coaches in the league felt about him. So we certainly were missing a heck of a guy in the middle. I'm very proud of our group. We kind of filled in the hole without him. His surgery was successful, and you certainly look forward to coming him back. But I think a double-double guy you need down the stretch.
Mike, I certainly don't mean to be anti-Air Force when I say this, but if they want the 34 best teams in the country, I don't see how they can put Air Force in ahead of Notre Dame. Does it stick in your craw a little bit that Air Force, after not having played the same schedule you've played, is in the tournament?
Well, it does, and maybe not necessarily Air Force, but a couple of them you look at and you say, you know, man, we really went out and challenged ourselves, and then the Big East Conference threw us a heck of a challenge as far as playing Pitt, Connecticut, and Syracuse twice. You know, the UTEP situation, but you can't make us a 13. I don't think it's fair to the other seed if you make us a 13. And but you know what, Jay, we had our chances. We made a heck of a run at this thing. And Jay, you did a bunch of our games. You've seen the change of our basketball team. That we actually had some suspense today, I think was a heck of a thing for this group because, you know, at 4-5, 10-9 in the, you know, I didn't think we'd be here. And we are playing our best basketball right now. I'm just glad we get to keep playing.
Mike, thanks for joining us. Obviously very gracious. You know, you're going to be on TV more. It's just going to be in the NIT, unfortunately, not the NCAA tournament for you guys. And interesting, when you talk about the NIT, you can hear that Mike's excited about playing in the NIT. One other team that got snubbed, Colorado, reportedly voted not to accept an NIT bid, so we'll have to see if they follow through on that. When we come back, we'll talk to the coach of the Stanford Cardinals. So many thrilling victories this season, including this one. They did come up 1 game short of that perfect regular season, but went back and won the Pac-10 championship, avenging that loss.
Oh, and they've got it. 2 seconds. Robinson at the buzzer. Yes! 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 Robinson at the buzzer.
Hernandez lost the handle. It's picked up by Reddick. Loose ball. Diving for the ball. Reddick gets it to Robinson. You got 3 seconds. Reddick's got to take a shot. He fires it up. He got it! How do you like it? Can you believe it? Cardinal wins!
That was indeed unbelievable. One of many heroic shots Stanford hit to stay undefeated until they ran into the Huskies. On ESPN.com, the question is, will Stanford advance to the Final Four? They're in that Phoenix region. They get to start out on the West Coast in Seattle, and they'll take on the Southland Conference champion, the Roadrunners of UT San Antonio. I know that Mike Montgomery is very well versed in the Roadrunners, so we'll get right to that matchup right there. Mike, first of all, watching Justin Davis return to the lineup after 6 weeks off had to feel good for you in the Pac-10 tournament. How far back is he, and how much does it help the run for you here in the postseason?
Well, we were really hoping to get him some time in the Pac-10 tournament. The first game he did well, really limited minutes. Second game he was tentative. Second half he was much better. But then the third game, in the championship game, he really came out and played hard. Looked like the Justin of old. He was follow dunks, moving around, jumping on the floor. We're better when we can play big. I think we're better when I have the flexibility of moving Nick Robinson around to several different positions. So getting Justin back, I think it could be a major factor for us.
You know, Mike, I was out there, and you really got great kids, great attitude, really play as a team, very cohesive. How important was it for your kids to win the Pac-10 tournament? Because the bottom line is, a year ago, you weren't too excited about being in a Pac-10 tournament.
Well, I still have my feelings about the tournament. They're not going to change. I'm not going to be a hypocrite that way just because we won it. But I think it was important. It was pretty negative. You know, the Pac-10 hasn't gotten a lot of respect this year. People think the league's down, and, you know, and maybe so in some regards. But, you know, having to play through 18 games and some of the travel that we have is really tough. There are a lot of teams that are a little bit harder to beat than I think their record would indicate. But being able to come back, we didn't play well against Washington State. We won at the buzzer there. We beat them pretty easily. Oregon's a good basketball team that had us down 19 at their place, and we beat them as well. And then to avenge really the only loss we had at Washington, I think was critical for our kids' confidence. I think it was critical for us to get a #1 seed and really to end up where we are with some momentum going into the thing.
Well, Mike, you look at the draw right now. There's one team I'm looking at that spoiled the party for you guys a couple of years ago that happens to be right there on your side again, Maryland. What's your feelings about this draw?
You know, I haven't looked at it in depth. I think everybody could look at their own bracket and say, wow, look at those guys. They're really good. My honest opinion is there's 16 to 20 teams that has a legitimate chance to win the NCAA championships. I really believe that. I think parity's out there. I mean, you look at Duke, as good as Duke is, having gotten beat at home Georgia Tech and just lost to Maryland again. Maryland's really good. Those kids play really hard. Our bracket's hard. Every game you play is hard in a tournament. You're down to the top 20% of the teams in Division I. Everybody has winning records. They know how to win. They're playing with confidence, or they wouldn't be in the tournament. That's what makes it such a great tournament. So we're not going to look ahead at all. We're going to take it one by one. We've tried to do that all year long, but certainly the spotlight's going to be on us a little bit as a #1 seed.
Hey, Mike, when you had Josh Childress out early in the year, and then, of course, on that road trip where he gets a tip in at Arizona State, and he just blows away 19 points against Arizona, he has been the one guy everybody looks at. But to me, watching you play, Chris Hernandez has been the one guy that's made things happen as far as being a leader to go with Childress in that perimeter.
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. You look at our perimeter people, Josh Childress is the poster child. He's really good. He does a lot of things, and he's getting a lot of honors, and we're all really happy for him. You know, Matt Reddick, he shot the ball extremely well from three. He's a great shooter, but the reality is the glue is Chris Hernandez. He's the guy everybody looks to. You know, he's getting kind of tired of being called the tough kid, but that's really what he is. He's a tough-minded kid that everybody looks to kind of hold us together. So he's got to stay healthy. You know, he's got a little bit of a back issue, and we were concerned about 3 straight games in the Pac-10 tournament, but he's a guy that holds us together, no question.
Mike, thanks for your time. UT San Antonio and Stanford will be the first game. Alabama, Southern Illinois in round 2. We appreciate it. Let's see what America thinks now. Will Stanford advance to the Final Four? Well, 62% say no, 38% say yes. Certainly if you like Maryland, the ACC champs full of confidence. If you like Connecticut, the Big East champs full of confidence. They're also in that bracket. Not everybody can get to the Final Four, but 62-38, they say no. Stanford will not.
Hey, Chris, they had a lot of luck last time when the tournament was in San Antonio. They went to the Final Four in '98.
Yes, they did.
Yes, sir. The big Cardinal was there.
We're going to shift back to the Atlanta region where Duke is the top seed. We've given you our opinions on the first-round games, but there's a long way to go. We'll keep it going after this. 5-minute stretch, except for Andy Katz, who was already standing up. We are ready to proceed to round number 2 of our Bracketology special. Predictions ahead. Now we had Duke, of course, moving over Alabama State. And Arizona, I guess that was a 2-1 vote over the 8-seed Seton Hall to break that tie, even though I'm still skeptical about Arizona. Consider that a pep talk. Illinois against Cincinnati in the 4 versus 5. Let's go back now. Duke against Arizona. That's exactly the kind of Saturday CBS marquee second-round game they love between a big-name team. And that's what Arizona is. It's a big-name team that hasn't played big this year yet, Dick.
Well, I think the lack of depth, I really think that hurts them big time. I look at that matchup right there. I'd certainly give an edge to Duke because of their perimeter play. They got 5 guys that can play on a perimeter. But Duke needs Sheldon Williams in a game, as you saw today. As soon as he went out of the game, edge went to Maryland. They had no balance, no inside attack at all. But I would give Duke the edge because of Williams on the interior and also their perimeter play. Digger, they got the deepest perimeter team in America when you talk the likes of Duhan, Reddick, certainly Dockery, Ewing, and you throw Deng back there as well.
Well, I'll tell you what I like about Arizona. They've got Duke now, who is now 6-5 in their last 11 games. This is a different Duke team. This isn't the same Duke team that can punch you out. And their front line, as consistent as it has been, Sheldon Williams getting in foul trouble today really hurt them, especially in overtime. So when I look at Arizona, they've got guards, Shakur, and when you look at Adams, and you look at Boykin-Guamo Stoudemire, Salim Stoudemire, these guys can flat out play. I think they can match up to Duke's guards, and I think they're going to take the challenge, knowing that all they've heard all year is about Duhan, Ewing, and Reddick being the best backcourt in the country. I really think this second-round game will become a real challenge for Duke, especially if Channing Frye makes things happen in the paint, and this 9-game matchup with the #1 seed could be the first upset going down. Duke.
But you guys have Duke moving through. We'll talk about their potential next round opponent next. It's going to be Illinois against Cincinnati, a very physical, typical Bob Huggins Bearcat team that can survive even though it doesn't look pretty offensively or shoot a very high percentage against an Illinois team that's matured and grown a lot in the second half of the season, but still very inexperienced.
Well, you look at Cincinnati, certainly get better and better. My guy Digger and I love him. He picks Duke to advance, but then he says that Arizona's going to win. I don't understand that.
The consensus was them to pick. I didn't. No.
It's going to be a dangerous game.
Later, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that later. But anyway, you talk about Cincinnati right now, playing good basketball, winning the Conference USA tournament. When you look at them, their guard play at times can be shaky. When you look at Illinois, certainly D. Brown and Williams present a major problem. But I give the edge, because of Maxiel on the inside, who has really improved, I give the edge to Cincinnati.
Two things about Cincinnati. You're right. When you talk about what they haven't done and why they don't do it, what I don't like is how when they have a 14-point lead, they don't blow you out in the second half, and they let the ball in that game where it's 55-50. Why? Jason Maxiel has got to become a leader inside. He's been inconsistent. He's never had two great games back-to-back when it counts under pressure. He's got to get his game going. No one can stop. Well, he can dunk, but get the ball so he can dunk. Play with the consistency to score, to do this. These are the things he can do. He's got to be more consistent. Tony Bobbitt is the one guy to go to that can score in the perimeter. But Jason Maxiel, to me, has got to be the go-to knockout guy, and Cincinnati can't let teams creep back in or they're going to get upset early.
Hey, I don't know about you guys. I think this is by far the toughest region at all. When you consider a seed like Arizona at 9, look at Louisville at 10, throw in North Carolina, who's my sleeper. I'm telling you right now, North Carolina could have a magical moment and really destroy all those people and critics who've been moaning and groaning because it's been Heartbreak Hotel. That club is capable of going to the Final Four for the third consecutive year for Roy Williams.
He's going to have to use zone to do it because they're going to get tired, Dick. And Roy will use the zone. And that's what Carolina, they've got to play some because that's where they break down.
Well, they're in the other half of the bracket. Let's get back to this Duke-Cincinnati game. And I want to ask you, Dick, you watched Duke in the ACC tournament. I was talking to Jay Billis earlier. J.J. Reddick did not have a good shooting tournament. Teams are beginning to really defend him and deny the three-point shooting. Will they need him to get by an opponent like Cincinnati and get to the Final Four and win this thing? He's been in a slump, frankly.
I really think, though, what he's really done, though, is improved his game, driving with the basketball. Obviously, they'd like to get him open with some threes because that's when he's dynamite. But the key for them is one simple answer. They must keep Sheldon Williams on the floor like he played against Georgia Tech. He's a dominator, but he can't be effective if he's sitting next to Coach K, Digger, and he becomes an assistant coach. They have no inside game. If he goes out, he has to stay. That's why the Arizona game would be a key if Fry ever got him in foul trouble.
Absolutely. And when you talk about J.J. Reddick, let's talk about what he's done in the ACC tournament. Teams are making him put the ball on the floor to go to the basket. They're jamming him. His stats in the ACC tournament, he was 9 for 30 from the field, 3 for 17 shooting threes, a total of 27 points. If he doesn't get his game going, I guarantee you, a matchup against Arizona, they're going to have issues.
Chris Duhine, who ran into a camera there off the court, had bruised ribs, came back. You think he's okay? Should be fine.
Oh, yeah, he really looks okay. But, saying all that, Digger and I still think Duke's advances.
No, I don't. That's just what the consensus was. I've got Arizona advances, and we'll talk about that later.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Cincinnati.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I got Arizona getting past Duke.
Wow.
Upsets, I like
Moving them on, baby.
That's a goodie.
Moving them on. I love the Wildcats.
Coach K, you heard that,
you
baby.
You got it, Mikey.
You heard that, Coach K. Digger's got you out, baby, out.
We finally got an upset, although it wasn't the consensus upset, Reese.
Well, we're providing bulletin board material. I think there's some more of that coming, and we've got an idea of what Dick thinks of North Carolina. The bottom half of the Atlanta region, North Carolina and Texas in a 3-6 game. Texas has really had an awful time trying to score lately, Jay. Going back to Kansas State game at the end of the regular season, too.
Well, Texas is bigger and stronger, and they've got a lot of depth. But you're right, Reese. They've had a problem scoring. When they're really good is when they get the ball off the offensive glass and when they can get out in transition. But teams have been taking that away from them. That's exactly what Oklahoma State did. And I know Rick Barnes wasn't happy with the way his team executed. They came out in a little bit of a zone against Oklahoma State. I thought that took away some of their aggressiveness. They were much better when they were in man-to-man defense. But I'll tell you, Brandon Mouton is their key guy. If he's scoring well, and he has been scoring much better over the last 3 or 4 games, that's when Texas is most dangerous.
Yeah, there's no question. This is an interesting matchup for North Carolina. We talked about their starting lineup all season, the most talented, I think, in the field to 65, and a tremendous coach in Roy Williams who can guide teams through the NCAA tournament. But with North Carolina, the key to their success is, we're talking Brandon Mouton.
Texas here, yeah, Brandon Mouton.
Okay. Brandon Mouton for Rick Barnes, who obviously is looking for him. This guy's been on fire recently, playing at his best. And Texas, as you said, Jay, very tough team defensively. Rick Barnes has done a great job in terms of executing precisely on the half court. A tough loss to Oklahoma State, but that's nothing to be ashamed of because it's obviously a tough league and a tough conference tournament.
So who do you like?
North Carolina's not going to be able to get in any foul trouble if they're going to beat Texas. I like North Carolina to advance, but it's going to be tight.
Okay, we'll take North Carolina to advance then over Texas and move on to the other part of that bracket, Xavier and Mississippi State. Now, this would be a rematch of a regular season game. Mississippi State won by 12. Lawrence Roberts put up a double-double. Who do you like in this one?
I like Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State is just so strong at so many positions. And you start with Timmy Bowers at the point guard spot. He can shoot the three. He can put the ball on the floor. And he's a very solid on-ball defender. He's big and he's strong. And Winsome Frazier is really athletic. They've got Shane Power, who can also shoot the ball from the perimeter and handle the basketball. The key, though, is Lawrence Roberts. I mean, if they're getting the ball inside, Lawrence Roberts can attack the basket like nobody else in that league.
Yeah, Lawrence Roberts owned the paint all year for Mississippi State. The transfer from Baylor, what a difference he's made for their great season they've had this year. And he sets up Timmy Bowers. We look here at Lawrence Roberts down low on the block. He's just a force attacking the rim, a big wide body at both ends of the floor. He's really the key to this team, and that opens up things from long range for Timmy Bowers. So the inside-outside complement is what makes this Mississippi State team so dangerous. But Xavier is hot right now. They had kind of a fresh start, a clean slate, and they're on a roll in the Atlantic 10, as it turns out. Pretty strong league with 4 teams in the field of 65.
You wonder if Xavier's going to be a little tired. I mean, they had to play 4 games in a row to win that A-10 tournament. I just think that Mississippi State is bigger and they're stronger, especially at the guard spot.
But there's a difference of opinion here. You like State and you like Xavier, so that leaves it to me to break the tie about who's moving on. And, you know, not that I hold a grudge, but I picked Mississippi State to go to the Final Four last year, first round out. So I'll say Xavier moves into this matchup for the consensus purpose, and Jay, you'll have an opportunity for rebuttal later in the show.
They're going to sting you again, Reese.
They might. You know what? Fowler's providing bulletin board at Arizona. You know, we've all done it at Air Force. Now I can provide some in Starkville, too. We have North Carolina, Xavier. If this were the matchup, where do you go?
I would probably say North Carolina in this one. I think it's going to be Mississippi State. It's going to be North Carolina, Mississippi State. But I would take North Carolina over Xavier, especially since I said Mississippi State over Xavier. But North Carolina, with the guard, Raymond Felton can get the ball up the court so quickly. And I think if he's not too worn out, I like Carolina in that one.
Yeah, well, North Carolina's ACC tested their quality wins over top 25 teams. Roy Williams, there's nobody better guiding teams through the tournament. I just love their starting 5. I think the 2.5-minute TV timeouts really plays to the advantage for teams like Kentucky that have a short bench, or North Carolina that has a short bench, because it allows you to catch your breath, regroup. They got to stay out of foul trouble because they're not deep, and Sean May has to be a factor. That's why changing tempos for them is important. Then he's a factor at both ends of the floor under the bucket. He's one of the better big men in the country, a handful of one of the best post players in the country.
If they did get there, Romain Sato would have to guard Rashad McCants. So that would wear him out. Romain Sato is a terrific defender. He's long arm, but I think Rashad McCants would wear him out.
And Mississippi State did a great job on Sato the first time they played. He was only 2 out of 7. But if this is the matchup, and for our purposes, Jay, if you can live with this for a second.
Bulldogs.
North Carolina and Xavier. You got the Bulldogs going out even over North Carolina, too?
I've got the Bulldogs beating Carolina.
But for our purposes, we've got North Carolina moving on, Chris.
Well, you guys are aware, I think, of the history. Xavier had to get the 4 wins in 4 days. They're the 9th team that's ever done that and gone on to the NCAA tournament. Not one of them, since they've expanded the field to 64/65 teams, has ever made it to the Sweet 16. So Xavier would be trying to defy that. Digger wants to know that he's got Carolina losing to Texas, but that's a whole.
We'll Carolina's advancing. Carolina.
Okay.
I agree with.
Well,
James.
we got special guests coming up. You know this gentleman and his wife from
Who's
the
this?
Newlyweds.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, there he is.
Wow.
Nick Lachey, big hoops fan. His pick's coming up. Harbs for hour number 3. Welcome back to
That's my bedtime. I'm 64, Chris. You're a young guy.
I understand.
You didn't let me finish my point about North Carolina. I think it's going to be an unbelievable run by Carolina.
You got a chance to talk about that.
Really?
You got a chance.
Okay.
We're going to have your final 4 picks, but let's get back.
Digger.
We got to get to round 2, my man. St. Joe's, you guys put Texas Tech through over Charlotte in the 8-9 game, so it's St. Joe's and Coach Martelli against Andre Emmett and Bob Knight and the Red Raiders.
I'll tell you right there in that edge, I go to St. Joe's. I'll tell you why. That backcourt is sensational. Do you know, prior to the game against Xavier, teams had not scored more than 60 points against St. Joe's. Phil Martelli's got to get them back playing that defense, forcing turnovers, creating opportunities for Nelson and West. I think they make up for their liability. I know you feel they don't rebound, but the bottom line is they make up for that shooting the 3 and their defense when they're playing well. St. Joe's to beat them and move on.
I like to see what Texas Tech does because they can play their their quickness. And Bob Knight always has found a way to come up for a big game. He knows this is a big game, and I guarantee it's going to be an interesting game plan as you see him trying to defend the 3 guards that obviously can make things happen when you talk about West, Nelson, as well as Carroll. But I just think that the points in the paint and the rebounding is an issue, and I think Phil Martelli's got to figure a way to sort of resolve that if they're going to move on. But I still like Texas Tech in this game.
You heard Martelli say earlier his team was kind of drooping after the loss to Xavier. I think having a full week between that loss and playing the NCAA tournament, recharge the batteries and make a difference. You got St. Joe's moving on.
They're going to get fired up here, and all you guys call them pretenders.
Now, I couldn't
all you guys call them pretenders.
I'm not calling them a pretender. We could not sell an upset of a 12-over-5. Even though history says it happens, you got all the 5 seeds moving on, including Florida. How do you see the Wake Forest-Florida projected second-round matchup on Saturday?
Oh, I give the edge there big time to Wake Forest. I really do. I think they rebound the ball a lot better, tougher defensively, and I give that edge in that matchup. Chris Paul is dynamite. I know it'll be an unbelievable matchup with he and Roberson, but I give the edge when you look at balance, especially if Eric Williams starts playing in that 3-second area and they get some play out of Danilus as well. Justin Gray's got to be consistent shooting, but Digger, even though Wake Forest finished on a down note, I think Skip Rosso will get them ready big time for the tournament.
Yeah, this is a very dangerous Wake Forest team, and Eric Williams can beat up Florida inside. They just don't have the consistency with defending in the paint as well as rebounding and getting points in the paint. But I think when you look at Florida trying to live and die with a perimeter game, Walsh, Roberson, and company, they've got to find a way to get some points going to the basket versus shooting too many threes. But Wake Forest, to me, Gray is excellent. Chris Paul, by far, the best freshman point guard in the country that's playing like a sophomore, junior, senior. He is that good. I think Wake Forest wins this game.
You know, one of the 3 best freshmen in America, along with Deng, and I agree with Jay.
Right.
Also, Sean Banks, who's so underrated down in Memphis.
So you got Chris Paul and Wake Forest moving past Florida. That would set up a great matchup with Chris Paul against Jameer Nelson against St. Joe's in that regional semifinal.
Well, as my buddy would say, Richard Phelps, the doctor of hoopology, in this game certainly got to give the edge to rebounding, certainly to Wake Forest in that edge against St. Joe's.
Oh, you're coming around a little bit. You think the boards are finally going to show up when we get to the Sweet 16 for the Hawk?
Well, America agrees. They did not pick St. Joe's by an overwhelming margin to make it to the Final Four. You guys have them losing in the regional semis. With the other half of that East Rutherford bracket, back to Reese, Jay, and Steve.
All right, Chris, and we start with that matchup that has Richmond against Pittsburgh after we pay. We didn't pick very many upsets going along the lines. Actually, we have Wisconsin going there. Our brackets original. We were tight. We were divided on the Wisconsin-Richmond. We have Wisconsin and Pittsburgh. Talked about Pittsburgh being at the disadvantage playing in the state of Wisconsin. Where do you go there, Jay?
Completely unfair for Pittsburgh to have to play Wisconsin in Milwaukee, but I give the edge to Pittsburgh in this ballgame, and I'll tell you why. They are the toughest team in this bracket. I think they're the toughest team in this entire tournament. They're big. They're strong. They're men. They've got great swagger to them. All of them are like 34 years old. The one thing I worry about with that team, though, is they are so physical. They bump all your cuts. They stand you up on your cuts. If the game is officiated really closely, that could wind up hurting them in the NCAA tournament, especially in Milwaukee.
Well, I'm sure there's some salty swordfishes in Pittsburgh right now. Here they win the Big East, and they have to go play Wisconsin in a home game on the road. That's tough, tough draw for the kind of season they had. But they already play with a hard edge. You can guarantee this team will come in with a chip on their shoulder. Julius Page, Deron Brown, Carl Krauser. These are very tough kids, and now with the draw they got, they will be out to prove people wrong.
The salty swordfish is different from a frog dissected in biology class. Also in the round of 32, we've got Memphis and Oklahoma. You got to stay with us all year to get all the jokes. Memphis and Oklahoma State 2-7 matchup.
You might have to stay longer than the whole year to get all the jokes.
That's true.
Oklahoma State, I think, would come out of this bracket. I really like Oklahoma State because of their ability to get up and down the floor. And certainly John Lucas is an outstanding shooter from the perimeter, but Tony Allen's the guy that I really like. And Joey Graham's been a really tough matchup problem for people. That's why I like Oklahoma State to beat Memphis.
Well, this Oklahoma State team is so quick. Some Eddie Sutton's teams in the past were more physical, strong teams that played very deliberate. This Oklahoma State team under Eddie Sutton is very quick, athletic. They get out in transition. They get into passing lanes. They create offense off of their defense. And, of course, Eddie Sutton's been to Final Fours before. He knows what the NCAA tournament is all about. I think they're a team going to the Final Four when you look at the Cowboys.
And what they do is limit you to one challenge shot, and that's when they get out and run. They force you to take bad shots and quick shots. That's what they're really good
at.
Hank
Iba, too. The spirit of Hank Iba.
It's Mr. Iba.
Mr. Iba.
Mr. Iba.
Let me tell you, 3-2 matchup for the right to go to the Elite Eight. Pittsburgh and Oklahoma State. State. Who do you like?
You know, I'm taking Oklahoma State in this one. Eddie Sutton's done such a great job, although I think that Pittsburgh, with their swagger, could easily win this game, but I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. I think they're better.
Yeah, this will be a bloodbath. Both teams may bring their football helmets to look like a Pittsburgh Steelers, Green Bay Packers matchup, just in terms of how physical, how tough these teams are. Going to be a great matchup. I like Oklahoma State.
You're going to need 3 Green Berets to referee that game if that happens.
There will be people defending one another
Navy
for
SEALs.
sure. So the Pokes, they sweep the Big 12. We've got them going to the Elite Eight, Chris.
That would be a rugby match. That'll be fun. You got salty swordfish over there. I'm over here swinging with the Sharks, but Digger, avert your eyes. Avert your eyes. It's moment number 6 on our countdown. Yes, it's been 23 years since BYU and Notre Dame. You can avert your eyes. You don't have to see it. We're going to see it.
Tonight happens to be what they call the round of the Sweet 16. Who is BYU's glamour boy? Danny Ainge, consensus All-American. All right, Notre Dame University. Who's their glamour boy? Kelly Tripucka. Brigham Young started the ball game in zone after it dropped behind and went man-to-man. Kite has fouled Tripucka.
Notre Dame went to Kelly Tripucka when they needed a basket. Will BYU go to Ainge? I think they will.
And there are 8 seconds to go. Ainge against Paxson. 5 seconds. Inside. Ainge scores for 2 seconds. 1 second on the clock. It is all over. But it looked like Notre Dame was going to have Kelly Tripucka as the hero. The hero's banner is lost by Notre Dame, and the hero's banner goes to Danny Ainge.
Epson T001.
Back to America's thoughts. Will Pittsburgh advance to the Final Four? They're also in the region with St. Joseph's and Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, Florida. Log on, vote. We'll have the results later. The guy who maybe just heard Pittsburgh was going to go down to Oklahoma State in the regional semis. That came from the other set, Coach Dixon, Jamie Dixon, the guy who the players lobbied for when Ben Howland left. He's the most successful first-year coach in the country, Big East Coach of the Year. Are you feeling okay with that 3rd seed and having to go and perhaps play Wisconsin in Milwaukee in round 2? A lot of people believe you guys ought to be upset about that.
Well, we're happy to be in the NCAA tournament and excited about the opportunity to play against Central Florida. And I appreciate all the guys looking out for us, and Jay and Steve and Dick and Digger. But we know what we got to do. We got to go out there and take care of our first one, and that's Central Florida, and we're preparing right now for it.
Jimmy, when you go up into Milwaukee, and you know right now, if your guys look at it as a positive, your frontline guys, to me, have got to make the difference no matter how far you can talk about Krauser and what he can do, but to me, it's got to be Chevy Troutman and Chris Taft making that statement in the paint. But your bench with Morris coming off and McCarroll, I think you've got the balance to go inside.
Yeah, our big guys are key. We've had depth all year long and used that, and we got to get back to winning the battle on the boards. We've lost the last couple games as far as getting it done on the boards, and that's really going to be our emphasis as we prepare for going into this game Friday against Central Florida.
You know, Jamie, when you look at your year, a diaper dandy year, you've been sensational in your first year. What have you learned as the season's progressed? Because obviously now you go into a time of the year where coaches are really measured as to how good they really are.
Well, we're just, as far as learning things, just kept learning how good our guys can be and how tough our guys can be. I mean, it's just, they're very resilient. They seem to respond well to adversity, and that's really the biggest thing I've learned from our guys. I thought that going in, but with our 6 freshmen that we have, also part of this group, they've bought in and done the same things and think accordingly. So we've responded to adversity. We've responded best to our 3 losses previously, and I'm looking forward to getting to practice and getting ready for our game Friday.
I look at Julius Page. He's sort of been the one guy who came back from last year's team and just has been sort of like mellow. He needs to really say now, hey, I've got to help this team become a better, productive team offensively.
Well, he's been helping us all year long. As you know, Digger's on the defensive end and the offensive end. He's scoring about the same amount of points as he scored last year, and he's been running the point. He's been playing the 3 for us. He's been doing everything, guarding the best guys defensively and doing a great job, just like he did last night against Ben Gordon. But we know our guys have confidence in him. We'll run our first, get him some good looks, and he'll knock them down. And our guys will believe in him. I believe in him, and he's going to make some shots, and we feel he's had a great year, and he'll continue to have a great year.
We expect you to put a positive, upbeat spin on things, but I know you coached rugby players in New Zealand, so get ready for that physical style. If you got to play the Badgers and the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and it's going to resemble that. Will Pittsburgh advance to the Final Four? We thank Jamie Dixon for joining us. Well, 65% of you say no. I mean, it's tough. The yes answer hasn't been present all day here.
I'll tell you one yes answer. I like this team, too. I pick them to the Final Four, but they should have a chip on their shoulder because I'm telling you, that will not be easy if they have to play Wisconsin and Milwaukee. Wisconsin is so underrated.
There's one team that's not underrated, Kentucky. They were a huge pre-tournament favorite a year ago, knocked off short of the Final Four. Can they get back to San Antonio this time when they won the title before?
Bryce. Hurley. Elvin Hayes. Patrick Ewing.
You decide. Antonio and the national championship predictions. This is round 2. We don't even know who Kentucky's going to play. We got them through to the next round to take on UAB. You guys thought they'd beat Washington, Providence, and Kansas. The Jacks have won 20 straight first-round games, so we'll put them through. UAB and Kentucky. What could UAB do to give Kentucky trouble?
Well, certainly they got good guard play, but the bottom line is when you look at Kentucky, I just love their depth. I like the fact that now Azubuike's playing well. Barber's starting to give them positive minutes. Fitch came off the bench the other day at 24. They're making perimeter shots, and defensively, that's a common denominator. My friends, I firmly believe deja vu 98 when Tubby in his first year was in San Antonio, and he was the toast of San Antonio walking around the Riverwalk. I got to believe, Tubby, that's my call to win the national title.
I'll disagree. We'll talk about that later. But talking about Providence, I think Providence is going to really get back and play. They lost 3 straight. Ryan Gomes is so physical inside, and Kansas gets in foul trouble, and that's a difference. And their bench has not been productive. But I feel now that Ryan Gomes and company getting double-doubles, playing that 2-3 zone, which Tim Welch does very, very well. They've had an excellent year, and forget the 3 straight losses. They'll regroup. McGrath will start shooting the ball. This is a very solid team in Providence.
I take the Jayhawks in that matchup.
You
I really do. Yes, I do.
I will break the tie. And we'll put Providence
are getting
through.
better.
All right, we'll put Providence through for the sake of discussion here. Providence against Kentucky. Now, last year Keith Bogans got hurt in the NCAA tournament. They ran into a superstar in Dwayne Wade and a very good defensive team of Marquette. They got knocked out short of the Final Four. What would concern you, if at all, if you're Tubby Smith?
Well, I'd be concerned at the fact that a guy like Ryan Gomes can carry that Providence team if he got on fire. I don't think they're going to be there, though. I think it's going to be Kansas and Kentucky, but it's a great tradition of both schools. However, Ryan Gomes is the kind of guy who could get on fire and create a problem. I had them against Illinois. They were absolutely brilliant, but at the end of the year have not played on an uptick. I give Kentucky the big edge.
Yeah, I got to agree. I think Gerald Fitch back in that lineup where he scores on the perimeter. Cliff Hawkins is capable of doing the same thing. And Kentucky is so physical inside. What they'll do is a great job of doubling down on Ryan Gomes from the weak side. Not ball side, but from the weak side. They'll come over, rotate, and take him out of the game offensively.
I got my buddy in the house, Jerry Healy's a big Kentucky fan, man, from Lexington. He's screaming over here on the set. He says, you got to go with my Cats.
Well, Kentucky's a team that knows how to play in domes. You got to move them through in St. Louis, and let's see what the guys think about the other half of that St. Louis bracket.
And, Chris, I believe these guys agree that Kentucky has a pretty open side, but the bottom half might be a little bit trickier. And we'll start with the teams we put through: Boston College and Georgia Tech. Steve, what about the Jackets here?
Well, I love Georgia Tech all season long. Their speed and quickness, that creates their offense off of their defense. They have so many weapons. B.J. Elder, Jarrett Jack, Ismail Muhammad in transition. Luke Schencer playing well down the stretch in some big games for them. I think they go all the way out to Elite Eight and then face Kentucky, and Kentucky moves on.
All right, what about Michigan State and Gonzaga? Jay, Spartans a type of team that could really give Gonzaga the fits?
Well, a couple of years ago, they were the type of team that could really give them fits, and they played in the tournament in the Atlanta region a couple of years ago. But Michigan State is not the same type of team that could bruise you inside and beat you up on the glass. And I think Gonzaga is more of this type of team this year. They're the better rebounding team. And Tom Izzo is going to be able to put this up on the bullet board. I think Gonzaga is going to get past Michigan State.
Ronnie Turioff's the kind of guy you would expect to see in a Spartan uniform. We've got Georgia Tech and Gonzaga here. I sense there might be a difference of opinion.
Well, I like Georgia Tech, again, just because of their ability to disrupt and not allow people to run their offense. They're going to get you out of rhythm. They play different defenses. Paul Hewitt, the master this year at mixing his defenses, full court press, three-quarter court, half court trapping, some zone, some man, a lot of different looks, and they are so quick, which I think will give Gonzaga some problems. But I love Mark Few, but I think the fly fisherman might be in trouble in this matchup.
Well, the guards are going to give Gonzaga some problems, but I think the big guys are going to give some problems to Georgia Tech. I like Corey Violette laying out some of those guys on some screens and Blake Stepp hitting from deep. I'm going to say Gonzaga is going to advance.
All right, so that means you would leave me with this. And this is a coin flip to me, but I guess for the sake of argument, I'll take Georgia Tech to move out and face Kentucky in the Elite Eight, guys.
Digger likes Georgia Tech. Dick likes Gonzaga in that one.
No, I like Georgia Tech.
You just changed your mind in the last 2 seconds.
I love Gonzaga, but I really love that's going to be a tough matchup for Gonzaga.
You just switched in
the
3
athleticism.
seconds.
No.
You heard the votes and you just
got to
switched.
quote me accurately, Mr. Fowler. I like right there in that matchup Georgia Tech. I love Gonzaga, but in that matchup, the athleticism is too much.
Out of the ACC. Okay, we talked about Providence in this bracket here. This next moment in our countdown is an absolutely nightmarish one for Providence. We ask you to send in your votes in the top moments, and send them in. You did.
Burton, little trouble. Now they loop it in the right. Nobody's home. Picked off by Miller. Gores ahead. Lane's on the other wing. He bangs. Yeah! Send it in, Jerome! Ripped it down.
No reason for a technical foul. Just inferior equipment and superior body strength.
We're going to be a while, folks.
The difference in carbs between Miller Lite and Coors Light is only 1.8 grams. You can burn 1.8 grams dancing. Slow dancing. So do a little dance and drink a little Rocky Mountain.
Trying to get there to that region, Stanford and Alabama. We projected the 1 versus 8 matchup in the second round. Syracuse over BYU, Maryland over UTEP. Let's first talk about Stanford against Alabama. Kennedy, Winston and company, an Alabama team. I think it'll be a lot of trouble for Stanford potentially.
Oh, yeah.
Even though Montgomery said Justin Davis is back 100% now and playing well.
Well, Kennedy Winston is an outstanding player. So is Shelton. When you got Winston and Shelton as a combination, and plus they played against such a dynamite schedule. I think they made a great decision playing a schedule strength that was really super. I think that has helped them, and they are a dangerous foe. However, saying all that, I think Stanford moves on.
I don't think Alabama can guard people that can penetrate and make things happen. When you look at Chris Hernandez, he can run this team so well, and he'll find people open inside. Doesn't matter if it's Justin Davis or if it's Rob Little. But I don't know how they're going to stop Josh Childress because he's so explosive. He's outside. He's 6'7", a solid player. Stanford moves on.
All right, now who will Stanford play? Syracuse and Maryland is the other game. John Gilchrist has apparently decided that he's the second coming of John Lucas Sr. How do you see that?
Oh, I'm going to tell you, this kid has really developed to be one of the premier point guards in America, scoring point guards. He has a little chip on his shoulder. That's a positive. Plays with a lot of real feeling. I really believe that is trouble for Stanford. I think they can have big-time trouble. They got to hope that Syracuse moves on because they can shoot the ball, and I think they can attack that 2-3. But I don't think they can handle all the pressure and the depth that Maryland has.
I think Maryland is so strong when you look at how they make things happen inside and outside, with Gilchrist making it so explosive and what he's done in the ACC tournament. But on the inside, I just think that Maryland has that edge when you look at guys that can get those points in the paint. And Jamar Smith is so solid, and Travis Garrison played so well. I just think Maryland's too tough for them.
Hey, guys, think about this. They beat in 3 days the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 seed in the toughest conference in America.
Yeah, but I think they're going to be tired, and that's why I give the edge to Stanford.
Oh, they're not going to be tired with 4 days to rest. Those kids, those kids are resilient, man. I don't buy the
Even though the game's in Denver and Carmelo Anthony could be there to root on Syracuse.
As long as he sits in the crowd. As long as he sits in the crowd.
Don't worry about it.
They're not going to worry about him.
All right, we'll find out about that Syracuse-Maryland matchup now. I mean, is this you got Maryland?
I got Maryland in this. I think Maryland's depth, I think their pressure defensively, I think their athleticism, and the toughness of Gilchrist, I give him the edge.
Yeah, I do, but I think Stanford's going to show up in this game. I know McGarry's going to be mad at me, but I just think Stanford is going to have the depth and the bench to make things happen. And from that standpoint, I just look to Stanford move on with Josh.
Gary never gets
You're just
mad.
trying to give him a
Gary
pep
won't
talk.
get mad. Gary's the nicest guy in the world.
Reese, that's the old Digger reverse psychology, trying to inspire the turtle.
right.
I've seen this before. What are you guys?
It's happened a time or two before. Also, we have teams trying to get to Phoenix in the round of 32. SEC, ACC match. matchup, North Carolina State and Vanderbilt. NC State, the 3 seed there, have to get past Lafayette in the first round. You guys think they will? How do they match up with the Commodores?
Well, like NC State in this game, a very evenly matched team here. These two teams matched up, but Marcus Melvin, the ability to step inside and also step away from the bucket to knock down shots. And Julius Hodge is a playmaker with the clock running down, someone that can create for himself or his teammates. And that spread court offense, very difficult to prepare for that Princeton-style set.
And the other half of the bottom, mentor or protege, Calhoun or Lato?
Well, I'm going to go with Calhoun on that one. Dave Lato certainly knows everything that UConn does, but it's not going to be enough because UConn has 2 of the best 10 players in America in Ben Gordon and Emeka Okafor. They are playing well. They beat Pittsburgh playing in Pittsburgh style. I think they can beat DePaul because they'll be able to speed them up, get out in transition. I like UConn.
All right, so that would take us to a Sweet 16 matchup of North Carolina State and UConn.
These teams played a couple years ago, and Caron Butler was the difference. There's no Caron Butler, but there is Okafor and Gordon. I like UConn to advance against NC State.
Yeah, I like UConn to come out of this region and cut down the nets in the Final Four. I think what the one vulnerability of UConn is if teams late in the game employ the Haka-Husky, they're going to have to make free throws, otherwise they could be in trouble. But it seems as though Villanueva and Okafor being out has given other players an opportunity to get in there, contribute, build confidence, and now they're probably stronger at the mended places as a result, and it seems to have energized them. And now if Okafor can stay healthy, Villanueva comes back with the confidence rolling into the NCAA tournament, they're a team that could cut down the nets.
Moving Rashad Anderson into the starting lineup was a big thing for UConn. Denham Brown has been hurt, but he's a great player as well.
The free throw shooting, too, that you mentioned, and has been problematic, but Jay did a game of theirs earlier this year. They've charted 38,000 free throws in practice. UConn makes 80% in practice. They'll have to hope it translates into the games when they get going, Chris.
Yeah, not many national champions have shot free throws as poorly as UConn does. You got the chalk bracket, Stanford against UConn. Predictions ahead on that game coming up, but Stanford would have to go through Alabama, Maryland, and UConn to get to the Final Four. That is not easy. Moment number 4 now. An Indiana-Purdue game where Coach Knight made creative use of furniture.
The head coach of your Hoosiers, now in his 14th year, Bob Knight.
We see Bob Knight a little bit casual here today.
And a jump situation. Now, wait a minute, foul called.
Pretty obvious what call he wanted.
Now inside of the foul is on Darryl Thomas, his second.
Fred Jasper's now chasing Bobby Knight back to his chair.
And
he's
we got
got
technical.
him right there. Here's the tee. Looky here, looky here. Bobby Knight just threw his chair clear across the free throw lane. Picked up another tee. Uh-oh, now we got 3.
Now we got
gone.
3.
He's gone. Just glad nobody was in that chair.
Oh.
Miller, the floater off the glass. Goliak tried to follow Van Horn. Will he get it? He got it! He did it again!
There it is to Stansbury. Got 2 seconds. Stansbury lets it go with 2. Temple wins it.
Rhodes for 3. Doesn't get it.
Russell comes up big.
It is Bedlam in New Orleans. Juan Johnson hit a three-pointer in overtime to win.
Down to 5 seconds. Simpkins has to force it up, take it away. He got it back. Joe Smith with a tip-in. Joe Smith wins it at the buzzer with a tip-in.
Surratt going to the bucket again. 2-point game.
They are not giving it up, are they?
They got it!
Rice! Yes! Oh! Unbelievable!
Kentucky's got a chance to win if they score. Muhammad drives and lays it up off glass. Wait a minute, it's good! Nazir Muhammad with the lob shot.
This guy throws it long over everybody. Luckman can win it. Oh, he does with the count. Yes, it does.
And a huge break for Arizona. They still got a chance to win it. Khalid Reeves got it. Wildcats win.
Can you believe it?
Shot clock is off. Put it in the hands of one of the premier point guards. He's got size.
Tough shot, spins out on him. Fight. Calabria throws it up from the ground.
Oh, the ball's off. He doesn't even off. Oh, unbelievable.
That's the kind of action that's inspired passion among fans for college basketball around the world. Now, you've heard some opinions from those in the sports world on the NCAA tournament. Now we cross over to show business and bring in Nick Lachey, singing star. You may know him as well from the MTV show The Newlyweds, Nick and his wife Jessica Simpson. Now, he stepped out of a performance, Jessica singing to the president, to talk hoops with us at the ESPN zone in Washington. That sounds like a major marital risk, Nick.
Well, lucky for me, the cameras aren't rolling right now, so this won't be captured on Newlyweds. I'll get off the hook.
Thanks for putting on a tie. I thought that was just for us. Now, your predictions, you've looked at this bracket. You've had a chance to chew in it like the rest of us.
I have.
Give me your prediction. I know you're a Bearcat fan, being from Cincinnati.
I'm a huge Bearcat fan. I think they got a tough draw, though. I like the fact that they're in Columbus, but they're definitely in a tough bracket. I like Oklahoma State a lot. I've actually got them going to the championship game against Stanford.
When you're a fan of a team like Cincinnati and you see East Tennessee State, not many fans know much about that team, but that's a team that beat Arizona back in '92. They took on Wake Forest, and I guarantee you Wake Forest fans weren't too concerned, maybe like Cincinnati's aren't, and almost beat them a year ago. Are you nervous? Are you going to be watching that first game on pins and needles?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely it's not a gimme by any means, and the second round game against Illinois, I think, is an equally tough, or obviously a tougher game. The big team regular season champs. So they definitely got a tough draw.
Hey, Nick, what about when you think about the Mid-American Conference? So underrated. You went to Miami of Ohio. What about Western Michigan? Give them some love.
I've got them winning their first round game. I think that as the years go on, these conferences get closer and closer together in terms of competitiveness. So. I don't think there are any gimmies hardly anymore in college basketball.
Nick, I've had a tough day today. I've done the game over down in Greensboro, flew here, and they told me we were going to have the Newlywed Stars. I thought I was going to see Jessica. Instead, I get your looks. I mean, Jessica goes to the president instead of us. That's not fair, baby.
Well, she's a fellow Texan, so her allegiance is definitely with George W. tonight.
Who's your Final Four, Nick? You got one?
Yeah, actually, I've got UK against Oklahoma State, and I've got Stanford against the Cincinnati Bearcats.
Bit of a homer pick.
Wow.
You better hope that you do better on your bracket than Jessica does, because America's watching. They've just heard your Final Four picks. You better beat her in the head-to-head household competition. Your buddies will never let you forget it.
She does the thing where she picks the teams by their uniform color, so,
Hey, Chris, think about it. Yeah, Eddie Sutton going against, you ready for this? Tubby Smith going back playing Kentucky.
Yep.
You've already been accused of watching too much ESPN. I think you've definitely you've crossed the line. Nick, what are you like a 12-hour-a-day guy in ESPN?
Yeah, I usually watch the last Sports Center, and then in the morning when I'm running on the treadmill, I watch the same one all over again, and Jessica just doesn't get it.
Gratuitous Jessica video being shown on the screen right now. Hey, Nick, we know you're a big sports fan.
Get him off the screen. I want to see Jessica.
We know a lot of guys who are excited about the NCAA tournament. We thank you for taking time to join us from the ESPN zone in Washington.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Nick, I wish I had your hair, baby. Oh, wow.
You're looking good, Dick.
No, you're a liar. I'm ugly.
All right, well, you're a good sport for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
We continue the countdown now. This is Duke, Maryland. This was yet another pretty good Duke, Maryland game. It was voted the #2 moment in the ESPN Silver Anniversary Countdown.
This is a tremendous performance by Maryland so far. The Terps making all the plays. They're up by a dozen. The crowd on their feet. Williams goes down the lane to lay it in. 53-5 to go. It's an 8-point lead. They need a miracle. There's one. Williams for 3. Cut it to 5. Do you believe what you're seeing? It's another 3. It's a 2-point game. Holy cow. It was 90-80 with under a minute to go. And now we go to overtime.
That's incredible.
Williams down the lane. Battier wide open for 3. I'm just staggered by it. A 3 would win it for Maryland. Dixon into the lane.
Oh, Battier rocks it. Unbelievable.
It's the most remarkable comeback I have ever seen.
From the 64 of the 65 teams in this field, give you that. You get a chance to take us through the consensus Elite 8 with 3 of the 4 1 seeds move through. Then it give your own Final Four picks. Yeah.
This is the consensus group from the Elite 8 from the, what do we got, 7 of us here?
In St. Louis, Kentucky playing Georgia Tech. Wake Forest against Oklahoma State and East Rutherford. In Phoenix, Stanford against Connecticut. And in Atlanta, Duke against Carolina. Well, that's all fine and good, but I'll give you my Final Four. And Dick and Digger, you better pay attention here, because I did get 64-65. Thanks, Chris, for the plug. North Carolina and Stanford. Got them in that bottom half of the bracket. And then in the top half, Kentucky and Pittsburgh. Even though Pittsburgh lost to Connecticut in the Big East, I think they're tough enough to get that far. And then in the final game of the season, Stanford against Pittsburgh. Stanford having to deal with all that adversity, all those injuries. They've made it this far, only one loss. They will play Pittsburgh, one of the toughest teams in the country. And then my national champ, Stanford Cardinal. Reese?
All right, Andy, you know, you didn't really have to worry about Chris giving you that plug, because if he hadn't, I'm sure you would have taken care of it some way or another. You look at the Elite Eight now, Jay, our consensus Elite Eight, and we're going to let you take it down to the Final Four and national champion as well. This is what we believe will be the Elite Eight as a group.
Well, we got Kentucky going against Georgia Tech, Wake Forest and East Rutherford going against Oklahoma State. In Phoenix, it's Stanford and Connecticut. And in Atlanta, it's Duke and North Carolina. Never met in the NCAA tournament, but we're predicting consensus that it'll happen. Now, here's my Final Four. I think that Kentucky is going to go out of St. Louis. I like Oklahoma State out of the East Rutherford region. I'm going to take Duke out of Atlanta and Connecticut out of the Phoenix region. I've been on UConn since the beginning of the year. I've never wavered off of them. And my final game is coming up. Oklahoma State and Connecticut. I like Oklahoma State advancing, and I like Connecticut beating Duke. And ultimately, my national champion, I'm going to stick with UConn.
Now, I'm assuming that means you want Okafor healthy. Would it change any if he seizes up in the back?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
Okafor doesn't play.
Well, no, but you're saying right now, as long as he stays healthy, that you're with him, right?
Yeah,
okay, so he's healthy
play.
enough now. He's healthy enough now, though, for you.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, what about it? You got a consensus Elite Eight, and you take us down to 4 and you're champion.
Yeah, well, when you look at the consensus, the one difference that I would have is I think Cincinnati will end up getting to the Elite Eight before getting knocked off. But as we look at the Final Four picks here, the teams I really like, Kentucky, Oklahoma, North Carolina, UConn, very similar actually to Jay. The first matchup, I just think Kentucky is stronger, a little bit tougher and older in terms of their intelligence. The way they play, I love Tubby Smith, the way he mixes his tempos and changes his defense. Not a lot of depth for Kentucky, but they are so tough on their half-court defense, and they execute so well offensively, and I like the senior leadership that Tubby Smith has. Then in the other matchup, I like North Carolina and UConn, with Connecticut advancing, with Okafor now healthy. If they can run the table here, there's no question. I like Kentucky to cut down the nets in San Antonio. I just think it's their year, just one of those magical kind of seasons for them. So look for the Wildcats to cut the nets down.
You know, it's funny. Last year I thought it was Kentucky's year, and Bogan's getting hurt was the difference, I think, in Kentucky losing to Marquette. Not only Dwayne Wade having an unbelievable game with a triple-double, but, you know, this year Kentucky is a team that absolutely could cut down the nets. But I still think UConn has the most talent and should do it.
Yeah, there's no question. I think that they are the most talented team. We thought that before the season began. You wonder if they've clicked or what that Big East Tournament Championship can do for them. Is it matchups earlier? You were saying that you believe 3 ACC teams would make it. This is before we saw the matchups. Sure. Is that what changed your mind, just some of the matchups?
Yeah, I think so. You start looking at matchups like I think Cincinnati's a very difficult matchup if they end up playing Stanford. And I think the Alabama-Stanford matchup is going to be very interesting. Alabama, a dangerous, athletic, very quick team. So it is matchups. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Wake Forest made a run to the Final Four. I mean, we're trying to obviously look in the crystal ball here, but there are some teams in the ACC. Maryland right now is on fire and very hot. So the Georgia Tech is a team capable of getting out that far. And North Carolina could cut the nets down, but I just think their lack of depth is the one weakness they have. But I do think they're a Final Four team. I don't think they can cut the nets down, though.
And it's those matchups that I think are going to give Stanford a hard time, because Stanford's going to have to play quick teams, which they tend to struggle with at times, like Alabama, like Maryland, like UConn. That is a bear of a bracket for Stanford.
Yeah, and if they have to do it in succession, too, making the game plan time after time to try to deal with all of those guys. If there's a team that we haven't advanced to the Elite Eight, that's somewhere back in the bracket a little bit, that you feel like could make a run, who would it be, Jay?
Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
I think Georgia Tech is the type of team, because they can shoot the ball so effectively from the perimeter, they can spread you out, they're going to make you change the way you play in order to match up to them. I think, frankly, that Georgia Tech would look a lot like St. Joe's to us if they had played in the Atlantic 10. I don't think we'd be able to tell the difference, given the start that they got off to going into the NIT. And conversely, if St. Joe's were in the ACC, I think they'd have 4 or 5 losses, maybe more.
Cincinnati, a very dangerous team with some momentum right now in terms of winning the Conference USA Championship, and that's a lights-out conference, so they have to have a lot of confidence confidence right now at this stage of the season. And Bobby Huggins, he's struggled in recent years in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but this team shoots the ball better than some of his teams that have gotten knocked out in the first weekend recently. And I just feel like this might be Huggs' year.
All right, we might have a couple of people on a UConn bandwagon. Difference of opinion, but you got UConn getting there to the championship game. One believes that the Huskies will win it. The other one going with the Wildcats, guys.
Yeah, Reese, thanks. We'll have Dick and Digger's picks in a little bit. Not just yet, but I have been writing this down, Andy. I'm not sure anybody else in America wrote down what we just heard, but I do have it written down. 3 different national champion picks. St. Joseph's the only #1 seed that nobody has getting through to the Final Four, and Kentucky is the only team of any seed that all 3 of these guys have getting through to the Final Four. You want to punch holes in that before you make predictions? Not yet now. Well,
I'll tell you this right now. The one common denominator all these guys seem to be going for is obviously some of the top seeds, but number 2, teams that play on the defensive end. Defense being the common denominator of those that can advance. You know, a lot of teams can win 2 games, guys, but to be able to win 4 in a row and get to a Final Four, I think you start to separate the really good teams from the great teams, and that's the difference. The great teams are able to advance, and one of the common denominators is defensively. And all those teams they talked about play tough defense.
If we go back over to history now, the last few years, what gets you to the Final Four are players that can play inside as well as players on the perimeter. We saw Kansas last year with Callison and Simeon, Heinrich and Miles on the side. You take a look at Texas last year, James Thomas as well as T.J. Ford. You look at what went on with Syracuse with Carmelo Anthony, Jerry McNamara in the 2-3 zone. And Marquette, yeah, Robert Jackson got him there as well as Travis Diener and Dwayne Wade when they upset Kentucky. So there's no guarantees that you can make it without the inside-outside. That to me is what makes you get there. The defense follows up, and I think seniors are important. Yes, Kentucky has that, but we'll talk about that later.
You know, star power, obviously very important. Guys like Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade carrying their teams to the Final Four. And you're right, good defensive teams means you can survive poor offensive games, and no one can play 6 great offensive, 6 good shooting games in the NCAA tournament.
Well, the games become a little bit more conservative as well, become a little half-court oriented, and the defensive teams that can play on that side of the floor usually get a big, big advantage.
All right, it's one game where you get a little luck, though. You win one, you're not supposed to win, and that gets you by.
We'll have the Final Four selections of Dick and Digger coming up, plus the #1 moment in 25 years of ESPN basketball as voted on by you, the fans. More predictions still ahead.
Hamilton certainly on a short list of greatest Connecticut players. They've got a couple of future NBA players on this year's team. What does Hamilton think of the chances of the Connecticut Huskies, who are Jay Billis's pick to cut down the nets in San Antonio? We ask him.
After we won the championship, my greatest memory was when they already had the papers printed up with my face on it, saying UConn wins. And I'll never forget that because, you know, they ran out there and gave us all the newspapers with our faces on it. It was a great thing and a half. When I first got in the NBA and I wasn't playing a lot, I always threw that tape in. I mean, that was a memory where I always say to myself, that was the good days. And now, when I'm here in Detroit, it kind of reminds me of that again, you know, trying to go ahead and win the championship. But I watch it a lot, man, because when they play that one shining moment, that song that they always play at the end of the Final Four, it always brings back memories. We got the best big man in the country, and we got the best two-guard in Ben Gordon in the country. So we got what it takes to go ahead and win that championship.
Certainly very possible you could see a Duke-Connecticut rematch in one of those Final Fours. In fact, that is a real possibility. 2 guys, I should give Steve Lavin credit as well, thinks UConn's going to get to the championship game, but come up short against Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, it is time for #1 in our countdown of the best moments in ESPN's 25 years of bringing you college basketball. We have to go back 10 years. Kentucky played LSU, and everybody in the world had a fork in the Cats.
I'm telling you, if somebody would have told me with 15 to play to be 68-38 LSU, I would have said you've been on Bourbon Street way too long this week. They cut it to 20, as silly as that might sound. Harrison for 3.
Kentucky starting to make some sounds like they're going to make a run here.
Brasso's going to square for another one. Jeff can shoot it out.
Here they come. They got it to 10.
They can cut it to 6 if that goes, and it does.
Oh my.
Delp goes up for 3, and he gets it.
Kentucky is on fire.
They only needed 2 to tie. McCarty for 3. He got it! Kentucky's ahead! Incredible! When's the last time you saw somebody down 31 with 15 to go and win the game? And they're going to. Kentucky has pulled off a comeback miracle in Baton Rouge.
Oh, you missed 11 free throws in the last, out of 12 in the last 12 minutes, LSU fans. We can announce this NIT opening round game. It's tomorrow night. Last year's Final Four team, the Golden Eagles, against the Toledo Rockets, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Dick and Digger's Final Four picks are coming up.
Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores!
It's the best time of the upcoming spring, you know. I mean, it's just an exciting time, you know. It's heartbreaking as well.
You can see the time. Wittenberg, that's a long ways. They won it! On the dunk!
For me, it's a real anxiety-filled but exciting time.
Sykes, long pass. Bill Jenkins, straight for the win! Go!
It's a great time of year. You saw Jimmy V and NC State's national championship there. So far, no picks of real long shot Cinderellas to get to the Final Four, win the national championship. Had Andy, Jay, and Steve weigh in. I don't know, we'll review your picks, but let's see what Dick and Digger think. This is based on our consensus regional final matchups. Now, these Final Four picks, guys, they don't have to come from this. You can disagree with this, but the consensus is it's going to be Kentucky against Georgia Tech, edging out Gonzaga there. Duke, North Carolina. Consensus is that Carolina will get to the regional final. Duke over Cincinnati. Wake Forest, Oklahoma State in the East Rutherford final. And Stanford against UConn. That's the only 1 versus 2 chalk prediction in the regional final. So, Digger, give me your Final Four. I know there's some dissension.
Well, I just went a different way. I just look at Stanford and UConn out there in Phoenix, and I like UConn winning. And then, of course, when you go to the Atlanta region, I'll take Cincinnati, Texas. I like Texas winning there. And from when we go back to St. Louis, I look at Kentucky and Georgia Tech, but I'm going with Georgia Tech. And when you look at the East, in East Rutherford, I'll take Wake Forest and Pittsburgh, and I like Pittsburgh there. Those are my Final Four, and I picked Texas to win it.
You got to keep going. You got Texas over UConn, then in one semifinal. Pittsburgh winning the other one.
No, I got Georgia Tech going on. I think Wake Forest going on to play against, Pitt beating Wake Forest in East Rutherford, and of course Georgia Tech beating Kentucky, but I think Pitt can beat Georgia Tech. I think Kentucky has problems with Georgia, and I think Georgia Tech can play them the way they lost twice to Kentucky.
Texas can score enough, Digger says, to win the national championship.
Well, you know, Texas is a very deep basketball team, but I think they'll miss T.J. Ford, baby. Miss T.J. Ford.
All right, Dick, it's time for your Final Four picks. As we go back again to the consensus Elite Eight, you can draw on different teams, as Digger did for your Final Four predictions.
Well, you know, certainly you can go with a lot of those picks right there. Basically, a lot of chalk. Duke, Carolina certainly would be an interesting matchup. As Jay said, never played in tournament action. But the bottom line is you look at Kentucky, Georgia Tech, Athletic Club. But here's my picks, baby. I'm going in that matchup with Kentucky, Pittsburgh. Physical defensive game, edge, Tubby Smith down there on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. Duke and Connecticut, I'm going yes sirree. Preseason, my number 1 was Connecticut, but I'm a little bit shaky with Mr. Okafor right now. So I'm going Kentucky, Duke in the final. Great tradition. And I'm going with Mr. Tubby Smith to cut the nets down to celebrate in San Antonio, just like he did in 1998. And let me tell you, there is no time of the year like March Madness. The best. You could talk the World Series. You could talk about the NHL playoffs. You could talk the NBA. There is nothing like March Madness. It captivates the nation.
Last year, picked against Duke. That is a newsflash down there on Tobacco Road.
Last year, 3 out of 4 seeds did not get there to the Final Four.
True.
Don't be surprised to see it again this year. 3 out of the 4 number 1 seeds not make it to San Antonio.
I hope the horses you've picked to get to San Antonio run better than your horse did in the second race at Gulfstream Park. It's awesome, baby.
Oh, really?
Beaten by 30 lengths in a 7-furlong race. He lost by 30 lengths in 7 furlongs. That's a lot. Respect to you guys. Rebuttal.
30 lengths? 30 lengths? That's going to... Tubby Smith can't feel good about this. Hey, we provided some bulletin board material. What are your final thoughts if you've had a chance to digest this bracket?
Final thought, Pittsburgh got jobbed. They should have been a number 2 seed. They're not. They're going to have to play Wisconsin in Milwaukee. That's wrong. And Air Force is a shaky pick to get into the tournament. Bob Bowlesby said that they got in spite of their record. I don't think that's good enough.
Yeah, 2 things that jump out. I also think Stanford got the toughest draw for a number 1 seed in terms of having Alabama, Maryland, and UConn in front of them. to cut down the nets. And I also agree for Pitt to win the Big East outright, for them to get to the final game of the Big East tournament, 28-4, and 5 wins over top 25. They got to play in the backyard of the Badgers. Are you kidding me?
Pitt,
woo!
Job.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Right now,
job.
Pittsburgh's got plenty of material to draw from to build a little motivation there, Chris.
I agree. That is the most controversial and the worst seeding, putting a Pittsburgh 3. St. Joe's as number 1 is certainly one of the most controversial things. Final thought.
My final thought was I thought that Pittsburgh got a raw deal by being sent where they're going to have to play in Milwaukee against Wisconsin. But I thought basically the committee did a great job.
It's just ready, get ready, and play. Period.
Survive and advance.
Survive
and advance. 3 hours? Wow! 3 hours? Wow!